Yeah. Sure. Get it. Hey, Steve. Steve, huh? I went live while you were playing. I don't think you anticipated that. I just thought, we'll roll.
I was just making sure everything was working.
Surprise. You're on candid camera, candid YouTube.
Is it working?
Oh, BMO, Lenny is a beast. How you like that, Steve? I mean, Lenny.
Lenny is a beast.
Oops. I think that's a compliment.
Lenny is absolutely a beast. Lenny is Lenny with an IE is the John Malkovich character in Gary Sinise's production of Mice and Men. And Malkovich is Lenny, the mentally starved child of a man, a beast of a man that's mentally a child. That
and so that's
pets
your
a dog and kills it because he doesn't know his own strength.
That's your avatar this evening.
Okay, well, I'm not hearing you. Oh, let's see.
Oh, guys, hey everybody! See everybody showing up here. This is excellent.
There we go.
Ooh, do you like my echo?
Oh, I should turn that off, huh?
No, it's kind of cool. We're gonna do the psychedelic episode.
Yeah, that'll be good for fun. Okay. Yeah, so that's where I got Lenny from. I got that from. I watched that version of that movie produced and directed by Gary Sinise. I didn't know he was a producer and director. He's talented.
Oh yeah.
Incredible movie, and I just got sucked into it. I got sucked into a couple of movies this week. One of them was Patton.
Oh yeah,
what a movie!
Have you ever been to the Patton Museum out? I think it's in Indio.
No, it's nearby.
Because he grew up in San Marino, just right down the road from here.
Oh. And I just love that. I just love that quote of his from his going away speech after leaving Africa. Where he said something like, "No dumb bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. You're supposed to make those other dumb bastards die for their country."
That guy was one of a kind.
And I thought I hadn't seen the movie in a long time, and I was watching that scene, and I'm like,
Well, that whole the museum is highly, highly, highly recommended.
"Ooh, sounds good."
If you're at all interested in that time and the man, and because that's actually where the U.S. was training the troops for the North Africa campaign, because there's the desert out there. So that's where they built the museum. And yeah, it's I've been out there twice. It's definitely worth checking out. George C. Scott.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Michael McKean.
he was so great.
So
in that.
is Steve slinging barley? Steve doesn't sling barley. Steve slings agave.
I put barley in my granola.
You're an agave man.
Mm-hmm. So I was hold on.
PRS is at the museum reverse engineering the new tank. Oh yeah, because of that whole. Yeah, that was some crazy stuff. So what else? What's everybody else got going on here? We got a new Serum Stonehouse IPA. I saw Wayne. What were you drinking? You had some scotch. Oh, Bummer. Sweet. All right, we got some good stuff going on. Steve, what was that guitar you were just playing? Just to get it out of the way, because everybody always wants to know when you're playing it.
It's a Fret King, Fret King Esprit 5, Esprit V, Esprit 5. It's sort of Trevor Wilkinson's take on a Firebird. It's made of mahogany. It's made in Korea or something like that. It's like a $1,200 guitar, maybe less, $700.
It's
beautifully made. It sounds amazing. Trev did a great job on the pickups. He did a great job on the whole thing. The fret job is fantastic. He gave it to me as a gift for loaning his company some amps years ago at an amp show.
Nice.
And because I fell in love with it, and he says it's yours. And
wow,
I've enjoyed it ever since, just because I don't know, it's a great, you know what? It's great sitting in a chair on your lap. It just sits perfectly in your lap to play.
Super ergonomic.
Yeah.
So how would you contrast it? Because I think that guitar and your Hamer are your only two humbucker guitars. How would you contrast those two or compare them?
Well, the Hamer is red.
Yeah.
That's the main difference.
What does that impart on the tone?
Well,
I want to know.
Somehow all that red that they put on there caused the body to deform into a double cutaway thing.
Oh, wow. So the ones that didn't come in red don't have the double cutaway?
You know what? I'm in one of those moods today where a serious question is not going to get answered. No way, Jose.
Then you better start drinking.
I'm in that contrary mood. Okay, well, here, what I got right here.
the Steve Fryette Gear Museum.
What I got right here.
Oh, there it is.
Is the Hamer. The Hamer. How
old is that thing?
Oh, I think probably 96-ish.
Okay.
So let's see. God, they're about the same weight, which is like too much. The Hamer's got the neck pickup is the original pickup, which I think is a Seymour Duncan. And the bridge pickup is a DiMarzio that
you put in there?
Yeah, that Steve Blutcher made for me. And
why did you need Steve Blutcher to make you a DiMarzio for that guitar?
and the necks are kind of C-shaped. They're about the same.
The
Hamer's got a darker, thicker sound, and the Esprit is really got a Thunderbird vibe. It's sparkly and sizzly and almost like a single cut Junior. I mean, it's just sparkly.
Brandon, your necks are Z-shaped. Very nice. I'd like to try that sometime.
Yeah.
Probably lose my way. Okay, so why did
Blutcher is a longtime friend of mine. I mean, we've been pals since forever. And when we would talk, I would say something about a guitar sound or a pickup sound or something like that. That was all. Just having a casual conversation about something. And a few days later, a pickup would show up in the mail.
Wow.
And I never knew what it was. He would do to me what I do to guys that use our gear. He would go into my head, try to get past what was coming out of my mouth that was like probably nonsense to him. So he bypassed, he had that gift, bypassed all the blah, 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 blah stuff that's coming out of the person's face and just go right behind the forehead and look and root around in there and throw away wrinkled up paper and shit out of the way and go, oh, right there.
But
and
would
then
he ask you,
and he would make a pickup.
Would he ask you leading questions to make you?
No, he didn't ask me leading questions. He would listen. And I think what was happening at the time was I was playing with a couple of guys, and that was at the time that I designed the Valvulator 1, the buffer. And the reason I designed the Valvulator 1 is because I was in this band, we were doing some cream covers, and one of them had a wah. I think it was Tales of Brave Ulysses, I think we were doing, and I needed the wah. And when I put in the wah, it screwed up my sound. I hated it. And the whole true bypass thing wasn't cutting it for me. Bang, pop, radio stations. So I built a tube buffer
at the Air Force Base.
Yeah, I built a tube buffer to put between the guitar and the wah, and then I could leave the wah connected all the time, except the wah battery kept wearing out. So
yeah,
the voltage, the power supply in the little prototype tube buffer thing I made had 12 volts. So I took that 12-volt supply and regulated it down to 9 and ran it out and plugged it into the wah. So that little buffer powered the wah and buffed the guitar from the wah so I could use it all the time. And that worked out great. And I was just telling him about that. And I said that we're doing a couple of Cream songs. And he says, well, how's that working out? And I said, it's close. The guitar I'm using is this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So you're using the Hamer.
I was using the Hamer, and I told him what I was using. And I said, I don't know what pickup is in it, but I said, I think it's probably a higher gain, a hotter pickup than I need, but I don't know. I'm just, I said, I'm not one of those guys that takes a lot of stuff apart and puts it on guitars. I don't mess with it that much.
Okay. Yeah. On guitars.
On
That's
guitar.
the operative term.
Yeah. And so that was it.
That's so
and then
funny.
A week later, this pickup shows up with some numbers on the back, and I called him up. I said, what's this? And he goes, I don't know. He always just, that was his way of saying, just put it on this stupid guitar and play it and shut up and don't call me and ask me stupid questions. Just go play it. And, then I think the idea there is that he wanted feedback. I think he wanted to have some kind of validation that his antenna were as finely tuned as he hoped, right?
Yeah.
So
that's got to be the fun part of his job.
Yeah. So when I come back to him and I go, okay, so I rehearsed with the pickup, the guitar, and I said, I don't know what you did, but you nailed it, and he would just go, like, of course.
Yeah, but inside he's beaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
you know how it goes. Yeah,
So I had to be really careful when we talked to not talk about pickups or sonic goals out of the guitar, stuff like that, because then pickups would show up, and then I would feel obligated to
the pickup stork.
yeah, exactly. Bonk. Oh, what's this? And I had 4 or 5 pickups laying around that I never did get a chance to try.
Wow. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so he was to mankind when it came to pickups, and he really knew what he was talking about too. He knew about Magnus. I talked about him in the past tense only because he's not there. He's still around. He's just we exchange emails every once in a while, but he's been pretty quiet these days. Today we were running around running errands, and we went to the wine house in West Hollywood, West LA, the wine
the
house.
non-Amy Winehouse.
Yeah.
The Winehouse.
Oh man, I saw a video of one of her early performances the other day, and
ridiculous. Yeah, it
such just makes you want to reach back in time and drag her out just before she disappeared, because my God.
Amen.
Oh my God. What?
She had it. She had it all.
What a force of nature. She's just like one of those people that my take on people like that is that their life force is too strong for the bodies that they inhabit, and the reason that they self-destruct that way is because it's just too powerful for them to embody it in a physical body in this plane of life, and it just blows fuses after a while because it's so intense.
Did you ever see I'm sure you've seen the film about Jimi Hendrix?
Which one?
I think it came out in 1972 or something. I saw it on VHS when I was a kid. But they had what were they called? The twins, the Ghetto Fighters, the 2 twins that sang backgrounds on some of the later Hendrix stuff. But I always remember this clip of they were talking about how Jimmy died, and they were kind of positing that it was sort of out of an arrogance, which I thought was funny, but it was just like sort of exploration and arrogance, where I just remember the line like they're talking about, Jimmy took all these sleeping pills, and of course there's a ton of differing theories on what happened and how he died. Mm-hmm. But these guys who knew Jimmy were like, yeah, I think Jimi Hendrix was probably feeling slightly high, and he got on the edge of sleep and death, and he just thought, yeah, I'm Jimi Hendrix. Fuck it. Let me see if I can die. And then slipped on out. I remember that was the quote. And then slipped on out.
So meanwhile, back at the wine house, I was looking for, they have a section of Spanish wines, and I was kind of thinking maybe a port would be good tonight or something, or maybe some Spanish thing like a Rioja or a Malbec or something like that might be fun.
What were you eating?
And I found this Esporão, which is it's kind of like a red blend. It's a Spanish red blend. It's almost like a meritage. It's not meritage, it's meritage, by the way. But I thought, this is cool. It's reasonably priced, and it looked like fun. And I talked to the guy there, and I said, I do this show where we sit around and drink and rant, and bitch and moan about shit. And he's like, that sounds like fun. And I'm holding this, and I said, so I thought that this would like be fun to just sip, while we're sitting around bitching and moaning about stupid shit that we do in our industry. And he goes, I think you picked the first bottle for that, So I thought, he just, and what is that show again? I'm going to check that out. That sounds like fun. So we talked a little bit, and is there anything else? And I said, well, I have this Herradura Legend, which I've been drinking, and I like it. And I said, and I've had the Cuervo La Familia Reserva before. And he goes, oh yeah, the extra añejo. And I hadn't heard that term before. So
yeah,
I went, is that how you're classifying the higher end? He goes, yeah, they all fall into the category of extra añejo. And I went, oh, extra gold. And I went, I see.
Extra price.
And he said, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm out of the Herradura legend today. And I said, well, no, I'm not interested in that. And I'm not even interested in the La Familia. I'm interested in something of that ilk, but it's not the stupid money. And he's just, well, there's this and this. And he showed me a few things that are between 180 and 350 bucks. And I'm going, no. You don't understand. I want something. I want something that's sippable, that's reasonable price, that I can talk about and like and recommend, on our show. And he goes, and he pulls this stuff out and he goes, this would be the perfect thing. And there was a guy standing there listening. He goes, you know what you need. And they both picked out this, the tequila ocho. And it's like $60.
Oh, okay.
And they were both this guy, this customer who was like a real tequila freak. He's like picking out, this is good and this is good and this is good, and he's picking out all my favorite stuff. I go, okay, either he knows what he's talking about or he just likes the same stuff I like. Either way, I like where this is going.
Have you opened it up yet?
Yeah, I just opened it. And
okay.
the one thing the thing that the guy was telling me was he was pointing out a couple of other in that price range tequilas that he says, you notice that some of these others are darker and he says the thing about the Ocho is it's a pure expression. It's not like some of those others where they caramelize them to give them the sexy color. He says a lot of times that means they're covering up for something. And he says, so pay attention to that next time you're buying tequilas. That clear, natural look is what you want to be looking for. And I went, all right. So I just thought it would be interesting because here's the Ocho and here's the Legend. Check out that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Now, do you have the bottle for the Legend? Because it has the ingredients. You can see if they put the coloring in there, which I bet they did. It'll probably be caramel number whatever.
Well, it might be listed in the booklet because I don't see it on the bottle.
Yeah, I have a hard time.
It just says something about drinking responsibly. And there's even a website called responsibility.org. So like that's just like cramping my style already. Deeply grooved barrels, blah 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 blah, naturally fermented, yada yada. And I think I had this on the last show.
Yeah,
I didn't do the underwater feeling thing this time. So
nice.
Maybe I didn't drink as much, but I asked the guy, should I drink it in a snifter, in a shot glass, or in a flute? And he goes, definitely a flute. And I went, all right. So I thought, so that's the Legend, which I know what that's all about, and I like that. And this is the Ocho. And it doesn't have the caramel and banana notes on it because it isn't aged in a barrel, right?
So what's the dominant, like when you sniff it there on the nose, what do you get?
Pineapple.
Oh, very interesting.
Pineapple and kind of a woodiness.
Okay.
Not like oak, but just. And that is smooth. Smooth.
I hate that term, man.
I do too, but
it's always like the person who doesn't know jack about what they're drinking. That's the first thing they say. It's so smooth.
Well, compared to the Legend has got the banana and the caramel vibe going on, and the oak thing coming through. And when you sip it, it bites on the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
But this doesn't. This has more of the kind of notes like a typical shot of tequila, where you can tell it's got kind of a little bit of a claw.
Yeah.
And if you drink a couple of them really quick, you'll go like this, you'll sort of recoil. It has that smell, but when you drink it, it doesn't hit you on the tongue that way. It's nice. And
so you're smelling a lot more alcohol than you're getting on the palate.
Oh yeah, I mean alcohol, serious alcohol vibe. It's 40% by volume.
Oh, that's it. My wee beastie over here is 47.
But that's nice. That's actually more like drinking tequila, but sipping style, and not snooty. It's like kind of down dirty, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
It's not. Doesn't have that nasty.
I need to try that.
aftertaste.
Actually, I
Yeah.
need to try both of those. I haven't had either one. Guys, you guys are talking about Jimmy's demise and his girlfriend that was not really his girlfriend, kind of. Yeah, Wayne, I did know that about Uli Roth's relationship with her. And what's interesting about that to me as, the massive Hendrix head is that she wound up with Jimmy's black Strat, the one at Fillmore East, his favorite guitar. And I think he has that guitar because it was hers. It was never seen again. It's known that she did have it. And I think that's where that guitar resides now, is with him.
Did she hang herself with it?
She didn't know. I think she offed herself in her car with just turning the car on in the garage kind of system.
Yeah, sorry. Nobody's going to get any sympathy from me today.
No sympathy, Steve, reporting for duty.
No, I'm recovering from 2 weeks of literally pounding power stations out of my loin once an hour, and I'm worn the F out. I'm telling you, man. Everything. We are building everything and anything that we can amass parts for.
Yeah, I stopped by the shop today, and that was quite a collection of sort of random stuff going out. Like, pretty cool.
Sorry for what, PJ? It's not your fault.
No, it's actually good for business and the bottom line, and probably, well, I mean,
power loads have been shipping every month. People keep no power loads. Sorry,
power stations.
You said power stations have been shipping every week of every month for the past since we started back up. Power loads on the way. Please be a little more patient. But they're about to drop.
Oh,
there's still a lot going on, but engineering wise and part selection, it's all done. We've purchased all the parts. We have everything to build them. They're getting built. And it's the first production of a new product. Even though we built a power load before, this is the new power load. And it's the PL1, the very first one that we made 100 of without the LED on the front. That was working out how to build it, right? That was like the beta batch. And then after that, we built the next version that had the LED on the front panel, the green LED that tells you that it's on. And there were a couple of improvements in that, but that was after we'd sort of encountered all the crap that we always learn building a new product the first time. That was what that batch was about, and they did really well. They were pretty reliable out there. People like them. I still get people contacting us saying that they use them all the time. They're great. And when's the new one going to come out? Because they like the idea of it. But this one is a little different in that it's got the IR.
It's a lot different.
And the there's just some improvements in the signal path inside and the way it's assembled inside, that so it's easier to build. And there's The previous one had a little bit of bleed. If you turned the volume all the way down, it wouldn't go all the way down, which it still doesn't do, because in a little package like that, there's always going to be a little bleed, but it goes down lower than it went before. There's less bleed, less noise, better signal to noise ratio, cleaner headroom, better dynamics. These are all subtle little things. They're not big changes. They're little changes. It looks quite a bit different than the previous one because there's more knobs on the front. But it's just refined, like everything. It's just little refinements that all add up to it's easier to use, it's more robust, it's harder to destroy, harder for people
I
to
would
break.
think that if something was, if there were major differences, it would almost be conceding that the previous versions didn't work. So I think when it's just little refinements, it's kind of a testament to what came before.
And that's probably one of the byproducts of the law of unintended consequences. If you think we're going to make a ton of improvements on this, and then all the people that have the one that you made are does that mean mine's a piece of shit?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
What was that scenario we're talking about with the snakes?
The Cobra Effect.
The Cobra Effect, yeah. So so what was it, India, where the cobras were?
Yeah.
Where there was the whole country was being overrun by cobras. Mm-hmm. So they came up with this plan to they put a bounty on cobras. So for every cobra you
great
kill,
British imperialist policy, by the way.
Yeah. So you'd get a little bounty for every dead cobra that you brought in. It didn't reduce the cobra population; it increased it because people were now raising cobras to bring them in for the bounty, right? So they actually increased the cobra population.
Oh man! Oh guys, I didn't know Bimo Faye Pridgeon passed recently. I didn't know that, man. What a drag. And then Wayne, that's interesting about that. I don't think he ever played the Black Strat publicly. I think it's just, in a vault somewhere. But yeah, those Sky guitars are, I mean, look, man, if that's his concept, that's fine. But I've never heard like a good tone come out of those when he's playing them. And we all know how amazing he sounded when he was playing that White Strat and the Scorpions. Man, that just reminded me, like probably about 5 years ago, I learned what's that tune? Sales of Sharon? Is that how you say it? I learned that whole thing, and I knew it for 5 minutes. I got to dig that up because I have a video of it somewhere. It's pretty cool. He was like Marty Friedman 10 years before Marty Friedman showed up. But back to decent tube tones thanks to the Synergy 30 combo. After 2 years of trying to love the Kemper. Welcome back, Chris. Buffalo Trace Bourbon. I don't know that one, man.
Oh,
what's the deal with Buffalo Trace Bourbon? I don't know anything about it. I'm not a bourbon guy, so if anybody who's in the peanut gallery could chime in and talk about that.
Miso, I think Miso Pal knows something about Buffalo Trace.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Miso Pal will probably pop in and tell us something about that.
Anyway, so I showed it earlier when we went live, but
ask and you shall receive.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
This is the Buffalo Trace.
Now, who handed that to you? Was that Nico-chan?
Oh, yeah.
This is what I'm rocking tonight. The Ardbeg Wee Beastie. That's all that was at Bevmo.
Ardbeg.
It is by far not my favorite expression of Ardbeg. For that, it would be the Ugadal as far as the normal line. But alas, there was none of that there. This is interesting. If anybody's ever tried the what do they call it? It was like their yearly special thing. What did they call it? Oh, Kelpie, and it was aged in those Russian oak I think they were calling it Russian oak casks. It has this really kind of rubbery flavor to it, and the Wee Beastie has a little bit of that too. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a little bit of that that was in the Kelpie expression being mixed in with this Wee Beastie stuff. So I don't know. Oh, drinking sake tonight. Very nice.
Yeah, babe. What sake? What sake is it?
Yeah, we'll see. Drum roll. See if he gets back.
No, the Corey, the 2 channels of the Synergy Deliverance module are not based on the 2 versions of the amp. They're based on the 2 modes of the Series II, and that's why the Deliverance module is called the Deliverance II module. It's got the little note.
So so the Deliverance Series II. That's what it's really based off of.
That's
Just
right.
to clear that up. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So then the Deliverance Series II. I believe I see one over your shoulder.
Which is yeah, well the idea was that the Deliverance had come out in, when did Deliverance come out?
04.
Oh, was it 04?
Yeah. You know how I know?
How do you know?
You told me last week.
What if I was lying or didn't know myself or just blowing it out of my ass like I usually do?
Well, then I would be wrong too. Wouldn't be the first time.
Kelly B says 2005.
Oh, damn. Oh, okay, that's hilarious. Okay, we're doing this this isn't a podcast. What the hell is this? A live stream. We're doing this under the banner of Fryette, and we can't even get the dates right.
All right, Kelly. I want receipts. What makes you the expert? Come on.
Kelly has an early one.
And what does it say on it? How does having an early one qualify you to tell us when it was made, dude?
You sound a little defiant there, Lenny.
Oh, I'm having fun. We have been building and shipping product like a drunk spitting teeth.
Serial number 058, bought in March of 05. Okay, that's probably key in there because that's early 05.
Right. If you bought it in March 05, that means that it was released in 2004. And it probably would have been premiered at NAMM 2005. But we actually started producing them in 2004. So, but that's good. I mean, we're right on the cusp there. January, February, March.
Yeah. It's the
that
same
would
era.
have been. We would have previewed it at NAMM in January 2005, and dealers would have placed orders, and then we would have shipped them around March. So that makes sense. Yeah. So it was completed and ready for prime time in 2004. So
dude,
we're kind of like, we're all right. We're all of us are correct.
Yeah, totally. Chris, your comment rules there. More 800 than 800 plus some high watt. Late 70s rush. That rules. That totally makes sense to me. What guitar do you play through there to get your late rush? Are you late 70s rush rocks off? Are you doing are you playing like a 335 kind of thing, or is it more? I'd be curious to know. And then Wayne, yeah, man, I walked in there earlier this week, and there was a bunch of SC30s up there, and we talked about you. I think you were the first one I brought up because I was wondering actually probably what your serial number was on yours, because Steve was saying that you had one of the earlier ones.
Yeah.
But man, like I had played that thing, I don't know, for 5 minutes at a NAMM show
when it was released, which was what,
4 or 5 years ago,
2016, I think.
And it was really cool, but man, nothing really ever sounds good in those rooms at NAMM. And so when I had the opportunity to play through it for a few minutes this week, it kicked my ass.
And not only that, the one that we brought to NAMM got completed at 4 o'clock in the morning, the Thursday of the first day of NAMM. And it wasn't until after the show, a week after the show, when we got everything all torn down and unloaded and back into the shop, and the prototype, which that was, brought back into the engineering department and taken apart, that we realized that it wasn't even working right. So,
man. Well,
it was
the one that I played,
this is close enough. This is as close as it needs to be for people to get a sense of what it is, and whatever I've overlooked out of just sheer exhaustion, we'll deal with later. And that's what happened. And you heard it that way. And I think even at the first time we had switched the tubes a couple of times.
I remember that.
We were switching back and forth between 66s and KT66s, because the KT66s that the supplier gave us were garbage. And they started failing on us, so we put 6L6s in it. And then that guy from Texas, Lance Lopez, came in. When we changed the tubes, it made it work a little better, but it still wasn't work right. And this guy comes in I've never seen before and just starts ripping the blues thing, the Texas.
Lance is ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. It was like, how do you even, I don't even know how you do that, dude. Ridiculous. Who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
And we just start talking, but we sort of like had a similar sense of humor. So we just started like talking like drinking buddies. And he's just like, this is amazing. I never even knew these existed. Blah, blah, blah. What is this? I said, well, it just now existed. And we're actually really hearing it the first time. And a real guitar player is showing us what it sounds like for the first time. So we're all learning about it too. And he's like, that's awesome. And then we brought it back. And so you hear it 5 years after the first time you heard it and it wasn't working right. Then you hear it after I thought, I wonder if it's a little too bright. And so I changed the tubes in it. And so then you hear it the first time.
Yeah. And what I was doing while I was playing it was I was compiling a list of all of my deluxe reverb loving brethren and going, okay, he needs to hear it. That person needs to hear it. This person needs to hear it, because it's like, oh, and okay. But Pete Anderson, you told me he said this about the SC20, but I would say it applies to SC32. It's like a deluxe reverb with all the shit fixed.
Yeah. I love that.
It's just because, the further up the power band we wound it, it was like, this thing is staying tight. Like it can rock, like as you push it. I mean, it's a beautiful kind of clean machine pedal platform. That was, of course, the way I was first playing it. And I was just hooked, and like, drool was starting to happen, just kind of losing yourself in playing. And then we turned it up a bit. It's like, holy crap, it's holding together in a way that a Fender cannot do. And it had some extra fairy dust as well, but super robust, tight low end.
Yeah. So you got a chance to hear that with that prototype fuzz tone on, and it just sounded really good. That was the first time I thought, okay, this is the way it really just sort of matches what was going on in my head. It was close, but changing those preamp tubes did make a difference. And then when you played it, and then Jamie Kime came over and played it too. And that was the day that I was going, do I like this or do I love it? And I think I more than like it, but I just slightly less than love it. And then I changed the preamp tubes, and I'm going, I don't know. I think maybe I'm going to tweak it, mod it a little bit, just do something on the top end. I have this little weird thing in my ear where I hear a harmonic, a high frequency harmonic that isn't there.
You were telling me about this. Yeah.
And sometimes it's really obnoxious, and sometimes it isn't. So sometimes I got to be careful, because that can trip me up. So if I think that that's what's going on, then I usually try to get somebody else to come in and bounce it off. And Jamie happened to come in to pick up some bits and pieces, because he's going out with the Zappa band, and he needed a rat kit for his power station. So he came by, and I just said, can you just play through this, please, for a sec? And he's like, plays through it, and he's like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
Like, okay. And then you came in a few days later, and you played through it, and he's like, you're like, dude. And I said, I'm just kind of making sure that I have my feet solidly on the ground. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? And
guys, this is actually, this is a great thing. I don't know, great. Steve's my friend, and I thought it's a great thing to see. And where I'm walking in and I'm playing an amp that he knows intimately, as in he designed the damn thing and built it and spent all this time with it. And he's kind of listening and telling me, I'm not sure if it's good or not. And I think it's just one of those things where, sometimes we take for granted, people who are extremely good at what they do are still human and can lose objectivity. It reminds me, I was telling Steve when he was sharing that with me that, like, when I'm mixing or I'm sending something out, and I'm sure everybody who's listening here has the same sort of issues sometimes, where, like, I'll work on a mix for 5 hours and it's like my ears are shot. I can't tell if I'm making it worse or making it sound like it's at the bottom of a septic tank or something. So it's just funny to walk in and have an amp that it's been out for years, and Steve's going, I'm not even sure if it's that good or not. And I'm going, are you kidding me? Like, we're listening to it together. This thing is incredible. So it happens to everyone. You just lose objectivity.
Yeah, and also I want to make sure that I'm not inhaling my own gases. So I have to be really careful not to snow myself. There's something going on with this. I'm telling you guys, it's the Tequila Ocho. It's really interesting. There's something going on with this.
Well, there's something going on with it that's keeping you don't love it. I can tell.
No, I'm loving it more and more. There's something going on with it sitting here in the flute, and I haven't really been drinking. I've been talking and listening, and I just noticed there's something coming out of it that I can't really describe what it is.
While Steve
it's wonderful that it's kind of developing this different bouquet. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it yet, but it's really great.
It's a new bottle.
Let's just talk to Corey for a second about the Synergy Deliverance module sizzle in the background.
Okay.
Here's what happens. In a preamp design that has a cathode follower stage that drives the tone stack, which a lot of different amps have. And the reason we use that is because it has a nice sort of claw, it grabs the distortion. When that stage breaks into, is pushed hard enough to go into distortion, it has a little grab that sounds and feels great on the strings. It's a little bit of that claw that we were talking about before. When you push the amp hard enough, you get that claw. And it's also it's a similar kind of thing. That's why people sort of associate a JCM 800 with the Deliverance, because it has a similar sort of thing. The 800 doesn't have a lot of gain. It does have this sort of angry attack to it. Mm-hmm. And the Deliverance has that also, but it's bigger and fatter on the bottom. But in essence, that's in the preamp. Why you don't necessarily hear it in the 800 and in a real Deliverance amp is because it's getting smoothed out by the power amp saturation. But it's there. In the module is a preamp, and the preamp is divorced from the power amp.
Right.
So if you're not putting it into a power amp where the power amp is getting properly pushed, and you play into it and you get that dig, but then as the note decays, you'll hear that cathode follower distortion recover. And when it recovers, it makes this little fizz on the decay. And again, a JCM 800 does that. Lots of different Marshalls do that, and lots of different other amps that are based on that circuit. And the JCM and the Deliverance does that. But some of those other amps, the plate voltage is lower, or they're designed to squish faster and have more natural compression, so it tends to bury that. But the Deliverance isn't about burying anything. It's about bearing it, letting it out.
Uh-huh.
So there's a little bit of a thing there that you have to learn how to manage. And if you try to use it as a clean channel, you really have to turn the gain down. If you're using it as a crunch thing, it's why it sounds fat, but it will decay with a little fizz on the end of it. And the power amp should be able to take care of that. And also the sag control in the Sin should be able to modulate that a little bit. And that sag circuit needs a little bit of adjustment to really do it justice. And there'll probably be something coming down the pike on that pretty shortly. But if you've got that Synergy 30 combo, it has a power amp in it. You should be able to crank it up enough to get it to smooth out so that little fizz thing will sound musical. But if you're playing at a really low volume, it's going to come through, and you won't be able to dial it out. It's kind of part of the DNA. It's sort of what makes it special, and it could make it annoying under some circumstances, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's just you could try maybe putting a different preamp tube in there to see if it'll change it. It won't get rid of it, but it'll change it. And I wasn't involved in the Sin 30 and this combo and the Sin 50 head in the design of those. I did the Sin 2 and the Sin 1 and the power amp. And we had a conversation about that, and they said, well, we're not going to put the sag control in those amps because they have amps in them and they're not going to need them. And I'm like, people are going to be playing these at low volume. It would be a good idea to put them in there, but they voted against that. And I went, hey, fine, your product. If you play that Synergy, if you play the Sin 1 or the Sin through the power station or the LX2, you won't hear that as much. It'll sound more musical because those are the platforms that those products were designed using when we designed them.
Yeah.
So, that's just a little thing. Sorry, that's kind of part of the stew.
Yeah. Steve, do you have much experience with PRS guitars?
Let's see. You should get a similar sound by listening to just a Deliverance effects loop. Probably not, because the voltages in the Synergy are lower than the preamp voltages in the Deliverance head, and that will be another thing that makes it that changes how the decay in that stage behaves. Depends on which amp. If you're talking about the Sin 30, no. The Sin 50, maybe, I don't know, but you won't probably hear it in the Deliverance effects loop, but you might. Try it and see. I'd be interested to hear your feedback on that. I might have actually heard it the other day and didn't really think that much of it, but the power amp tends to ameliorate that a little bit. Plus, I like it. I know it's there. I know what it's doing and why, and I like the behavior of it. But the plate voltages in the amps, in the Deliverance amps, are higher. And now this is complicated, and I'm not going to get into it, but it's a function of the bias of that. It's a function of the bias of that tube stage. And with a higher plate voltage, it has a higher bias current, and it'll smooth out that little fizz. With lower voltages, it'll be more pronounced, which is what's going on in the Sin 1 and Sin 2. And the Sin 30, maybe the Sin 50, I'm not sure. Okay. That's all I got to say about that.
Steve, what do you know about PRS guitars? Brendan wants to know what we think about PRS guitars. Do you have anything to say about PRS guitars?
Well, I just think they're obviously a very well-engineered, well-crafted guitar. Their finishes are to die for. The fit and finish, fret jobs. It's one of those guitars that when I pick up and play it, it doesn't speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
Which sometimes it's kind of irritating when somebody really likes something, a bunch of people really like something. You got to check this out. And I play it and I go, I can tell that it's nice. It feels great. It's obviously made very well. And, I mean, they sell boatloads of them. Lots of major artists use them. And They don't
light up in your hands.
They don't light up in my hand. And that's
Yeah.
not the fault. That's not the fault of the guitar. That's the fault of the operator.
Yeah, yeah. I have sort of similar feelings about them. They're laughably easy to play. Like, you know, I've owned a handful of PRSs in my time, and I always chuckle when they show up and I open the box, pull it out of the case, and it's like I could just walk on stage and play right now. Like the setup, the feel, everything about them is so comfortable. It's just ridiculous. They're just ready to be played on stage or, you know, used in a professional capacity immediately, always. But like tonally, it's been like, okay, so I've had this guitar for quite a long time. It's a hollow body with the spruce. They call it the hollow body spruce. This is my favorite guitar that they've ever made, and that's why I still have it. Super cool guitar, super versatile. But it's one of the only ones that I can kind of, I guess, that really sounds like something to me. I've always kind of struggled with them. Like, what do I do with this guitar? Like, where's it fit in the palette? You know, it's not quite in this area. It's not quite in this area. It's not. So, I guess, you know, like Steve's saying, I have high regard for the construction and, you know, everything that they do with the guitars. But, you know, for me, they don't necessarily work a whole lot for the work that I do. But
hey,
man,
Skull, I don't
Grissom,
think I would not say that it's unlively wood. I wouldn't say that there's anything lacking in the build or construction quality of the thing. I don't think so.
I think it's like
I think it's you know what Tom Anderson kind of described it to me.
Oh.
He said that the scale is halfway between a Strat and a Gibson, a Fender and a Gibson scale.
Yeah. Right.
And
so this is 24.
And his,
right?
it's what he seemed to be saying to me was that it's straddling both the worlds and a master of neither one of them.
Oh, thanks, Kelly. So they're at 25. Yeah, right between the Gibson and the Fender. It's funny though, because
I get that if you're doing the math, you're saying that the harmonics of the strings and where the pickups are located and stuff based on the scale are going to be different than a Fender, and they're going to be different than a Gibson, and great. And we encounter that. Our amplifiers are not trying to be Marshalls. They're not trying to be high watts. They're not trying to be Fenders. And there are people that don't get along with our amps because they don't, you know, when you put a Telecaster in your hand, you start chicken picking. And when you put a Strat in your hands, the very first thing is you start playing your Hendrix riffs. And when you put a Les Paul in your hands, you do Clapton or Beck or Page or whatever, you know, I mean, and like you were saying, when you pick up a PRS, it's like, what do I do? And well, you have to be a unique, creative artist doing things that don't key off of the traditional.
Yeah, where you're playing the guitar and the guitar's not playing you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Which is probably, it should be the instant for me, because it would be trying to break me of that habit of looking for the comfortable thing to lay back on. But for some reason, it doesn't have that effect on me. And that's not a nig.
No, because like I was saying,
it's not you, it's me.
listen to David Grissom and then go, oh, okay, that's available with those guitars. I mean, that guy sounds so incredibly great when he plays his. You know, and I have the same experience with Tom's guitars, with Tom Anderson. I mean, can you debate? I mean, they're perfect guitars.
Yeah.
Like, find something wrong with them. You cannot. They are flawless.
Yeah.
But it's almost like they engineered out the funk a little bit. Like it's just a little too, I don't know, like how do you do that in an amplifier? How do you clean something up so much that it's so precise? Like what are you doing technically with amp design to where you're like, okay, this no longer has some of the you know what I'm talking about? Like
When we made that, when I made the Pittbull prototype,
yeah.
I brought it around to a couple of shops and we plugged it into a Marshall cab and people were flipping out.
Okay.
And then when I made the first production Pittbull, I also brought the cab with it, the 412 cab that went with it. And a bunch of people went, "What happened to the amp that you showed us a couple of months ago?"
Same damn
and
amp.
I went, and I had done that. I had engineered out all the garbage.
Oh, it wasn't the same amp. You tweaked it.
Yeah, I took out. I had, it was thrown together and with bandages and baling wire, and when it came down to actually producing it, I went after it, you know, and I fixed it to death, and then I had to go back and figure out what I did, and tried to undo it, and then people started going, yeah, that's getting there, and I'm like going, okay, I'm getting there. The more I go backwards, the more people are like nodding yes.
Okay, so here's my next question though, because we know, I mean, we've discussed this ad nauseum on the show. You know, the Fryette amps are known. You know, a lot of people who claim to not get along with them are talking about their revealing nature. So you're not, when you say you're putting some of the funk back in, you're not just making them sloppy gush machines, right? That just, so what are you doing? What is that? What's the difference?
You know, refining the power transformer specs. You know, maybe the power supply filtering kind of maybe overdid it.
Oh, okay.
Like, I'm gonna get rid of that. I'm gonna get rid of those goddamn ghost notes. It's like, this thing sounds so dry and sterile. Put the ghost notes back in. Oh, okay, that's better. And then
there's
you put
the halo.
Well, if they like those, they're gonna really like this. And then you put the Memphis was a sea of ghost notes, and people flipped over what the hell is going on with this Memphis? It's like playing a note that I'm not playing. What the hell's going on? It's like, well, I thought you liked ghost notes. Yeah, I like ghost notes, but I don't want a gallon of them in my
I don't want
Cheerios.
an entire haunted amplifier.
Yeah. that stuff, you know, I mean, you get into it. You sort of go, you glom onto a behavioral defect of some sort. You know, and first identify it, define the parameters of it, where it's good, where it's bad, and where it should be and where it shouldn't be, and then you bring people in and see if they agree. Because if you at the time, I was working in isolation at the very beginning of the company. Talk about inhaling your own gases. I was like locked up in a room 24 hours a day and night, just totally gassed out on my own gases. Like, not like, oh, I'm making this great thing. It's like, I'm just like, is this right? 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 And then finally going, I guess I better just bring it out and show it to the world and find out where I'm at. And, you know,
you ever not done that? And then have you ever not done that? Like worked on something in the design phase, gone through prototyping and really not gotten feedback from the outside? Or have you always brought people in to kind of check?
I didn't do that at the very beginning, and I've done it ever since, because again, when you know, if you're mixing a record and you're not really a great mixing engineer, but you're mixing a record by yourself,
Mhm.
And then after a
That's
week,
fun.
you bring over an engineer, and you say, "What would you do this?" I would turn down the drums, the bass, the guitars, the vocals. I would get rid of like 6 of the guitar overdubs and 3 of the vocal overdubs, and just start ripping shit out, until you got like the 4 basic things. And okay, now I think we got something we can work with.
Yeah, right. Oh, Chris, I'd love to hear Devin through a Pittbull too. I'd love to hear him through anything related. Absolutely, man. That guy,
See, but then
what a brilliant musician.
the Ultra Lead was an amp that I was sure I had something there, and everybody
You did.
everybody pissed on that thing when I showed them around. Like, nah, not interested. Nah, it's just like, what is that? Why? What are you trying to accomplish here? And I'm like, don't you hear it? Hear what? And that went round and round and round and round, and I just like couldn't convince anybody. Then Page Hamilton walks in and plays one chord and goes, "Somebody finally got the sound in my head," and he was aghast. He was just like, my whole life has just been, every problem in my life has just been solved just by playing one chord through this amp. I know what my new rig is for the next rest of however long I can even imagine.
No,
all my problems are solved.
How long was the Ultra Lead around before Page got to play it?
A year, maybe 2.
So it sounds like people were stumbling over it. Kind of, and then Page comes along and goes, "Oh, you made this for me. This might as well have been my signature amp." And then it blows up, and everybody all of a sudden gets it because
we were building the Ultra Lead and the Classic, the CLX, and we were shipping like 10 or 20 CLX to every Ultra Lead. Wow. And then after the first helmet tour, it completely reversed. 10 or 20 Ultra Leads to a CLX. He basically just erased the CLX.
Wow.
And then it was like the same guys were going, "What a piece of shit." We're like, "Yeah, that's genius, that amp. Yeah, man." That's just the nature of the business. It's the nature of the whole process.
Wow. Huh. Well, now there's a Deliverance behind you.
Yeah, Vi had a Pittbull. He had a Pittbull for a while.
Vi had a Pittbull?
Yeah.
In addition to the Ultra Lead?
For a period of time. Yeah. A lot of people had them for a time. That if I tell people some of the people that used one or other version of that amp, they just go, "Well, I've never seen him use it." But
what was Dave using? Because he always used your stuff.
He's been using an Ultra Lead forever. Yeah,
the Ultra Lead. Okay. Yeah.
Prince was using one.
George Lynch. He stopped by the other week, didn't he?
Yeah. Lynch had one. He came by and picked up an LX2 power amp. I thought he just wanted to come over and take one to check out. And so when he came over, I said, "Well, how many days do you need it?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" "I need it for as long as I need it." I'm like, "Well, I just want to put like a number, like, do you want it for a month or 2 months on the loan?" He goes, I don't want a loan. Just charge me for it." And I'm like, "Oh, you want to buy it?" He goes, "Yeah, that's what I came here for." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." It's that happens every once in a while. That just happened the other day. A guy, I don't know if you guys know Jay Gore. He's like a hired gun guitar player extraordinaire. He plays with everybody that you can name. He's probably played with at one time or another. And I hadn't seen him for a long, long time. And he was just like, "Yeah, I need to check out that LX2. Can I come over?" "Yeah." So he comes over, and I go, "Okay, here it is." And same thing. I said, you want to take it and check it out for a couple of days?" He goes, "No, just give me the invoice. Let me get out of here." I was like, "Okay." It's strange what's going on right now. Usually when people just kind of waltz in and Pelletieri had an Ultra Lead for a long time.
Oh, did he? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he raved about it. And usually artists come in and they were like, I want to check some stuff out. I want to check out a couple of things. Do you have this? Do you have that? But lately, there's just like, I got some gigs. Do you have this? I heard this is good. I want to just get one. And they're just,
gimme.
That's the way the whole, besides production, that's the way everything has been going. And everything. It's just like, really? We're building a bunch of those now? Which means that we have to go figure out how to get the parts for them, because when you're not doing something in regular rotation all the time, you don't know what the status of the parts are going to be. What's the lead time going to be on the transformers, maybe some specialized pots or something, or the chassis. It just so happened that we had a lot of parts for the Memphis, because they started to sell a lot. And Cradle of Fit, here's the thing I always forget there's so many different people that use our stuff and we don't have a running list all the time to remind ourselves. So we just forget sometimes that certain people are using stuff, the Cradle of Filth, Ultra Leads. There was I forget, there was a blues band in England, a really famous blues band that just played all the time. And that guy used a Strat into an Ultra Lead. A blues band.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, I need to know more about your band, because I've never seen a blues band play with an Ultra Lead. And he goes, and he says, anybody that can't play a Strat through that amplifier is not a real blues player. The guy really, it was like I don't know why anybody wouldn't be able to play a blues in this amp. It's the perfect blues amp. I'm like going, okay, can I write that down? Can I quote you on that? Because
anybody can use anything for anything if they're determined. Man, so I want to know about the amps behind you, Mang.
So I have an original Deliverance and a Series II and a Sound City SC100, a Master Lead 100, Master 100. And the theme of this week's show is the law of unintended consequences. And what that's about is the creative decisions that we make to go in a particular direction to accomplish a particular goal so often just takes us in the opposite direction. That the creative process of a company like ours is pretty much driven by that. I mean, I know a lot of companies do this thing where they get together and they have committees, and the salespeople say that the dealers are asking for this in this size of a package at this price and blah blah blah, and they design a product from the outside in.
Yeah.
And it's entirely from a marketing perspective. They know who's the buyer and what their budget is before they even know what the product is. And then they fit the product into those parameters.
Right.
And what that creates is a constant turnover of models, just like in the automobile industry. And if a model flops, that experiment failed. Our assessment of the state of the market was inaccurate some way. We have to go back and study our model and then try to plug another product into that. And so you see these constantly revolving door of new models popping out that are kind of similar to the previous one, but different. And the difference isn't really that apparent.
This one has snakeskin Tolex.
There's just something, they just have to find some little key thing that's really obvious or marketable to differentiate it from the other thing, so that it's almost like a distraction. Just changing the look of the box in a combo, you're going to treat it like it's a completely entirely new product because they're going to present it as an entirely new product. Well, we've sort of always put so much time and effort into the design of an amplifier that it doesn't become obsolete in a year.
Right.
Because the root of the design is from the player's perspective, the utility of it, the sonic, how it supports the player, how it evolves with the player.
I see you as solving problems.
Not only that, but players evolve, just like product designs evolve. Music changes, players' taste change, the shape of the market, what's going on with the music, the marketing, the sales, how people consume music. It's evolving all the time, and musicians have to adapt to that and try to be creative and come up with new things, right? So what they're really using their skill on the instrument for doesn't really change that much. Just how they apply it changes. What kind of songs you write, but an amplifier that is capable of producing a wide range of sonic helping you manage a pretty wide range of sonic territory. If it does it well, then you can hang with that gear for a long time. So generally, our amps tend to stick around for a long time. I mean, like we were talking about the Ultralead and the CLX, they came out in 92, 93, and there's not a whole lot different between the way we were making them then and the way we're making them now. And the Deliverance came out in 2004, 2005, and here it is 2021 going on 22, and we've made some design little alterations. It's an evolution, it's not a redesign. We've addressed some of the things that are the stuff of feedback that we've gotten from the players, but without like going crazy and adding knobs and switches just because people want to like start that game, on a particular model.
That would be a huge mistake on something like the
we
Deliverance.
will do the amount of evolution that we want to impart on this model is within this little range here. So because if you go over the edge with something, you can just destroy the goodwill. And in trademark terms, a product or a brand or a trademark name has goodwill. And what that means is that it enjoys this sort of acceptance as a thing of quality and a thing of utility, right? And if you destroy that goodwill, then nobody's interested in the product anymore, and they're ready to move on to something else.
Sure.
So there's that, and then in the process of designing a new product like the Sound City, we're going a completely different direction than what we were doing with the Fryette stuff. So just like an artist that's in a band, and that band creates a certain kind of music, but then the singer or the main songwriter or lead guitar player or whatever goes out and does a solo thing and they do something different. They're not necessarily leaving the band. They're just doing a side project where they're expressing themselves slightly differently. And then they might come into the next album that band does is this person coming back with a new perspective. And now that band's music has evolved a little bit. It's still the same band. They still got the same vibe and chemistry, but now they've got a new little sort of piece of DNA that the guy who went out on his own sort of brought back into the stable. And that just sort of helps the band evolve into, help reinvent themselves. And that's what artists have to do, in order to have longevity in the business. So with the Sound City, for example, its focus was like this big, thunderous, clean, wide open, dynamic delivery. Nothing to do with, sustain or saturation or super overdrive or a deep feature set or anything like that. It was entirely about the breadth and depth of the instrument that's plugged into it and enhancing that, nothing more, nothing less. So after promising to do something with the Deliverance for so many years from people asking for the effects loop and the making the more or less switch foot switchable, we felt like that's not enough to evolve the Deliverance, because it's at a stage where we could take a fresh look at it and go, well, is it really everything that it could be? And with the perspective of that big wide open delivery of the Sound City, we could say, you know, as far as the gain and the general perception that people have of the amp with regard to like the mid and high gain sounds, probably doesn't need any help. But it's really, we are presenting it as an amp that's got a lot of dynamic range and can do clean really well, which it can. But can it be better? Well, now that we've been, getting, learning from the experience of having produced the Sound City stuff, we can say we could probably enhance the clean dynamic sort of feel of it and apply that to the Deliverance. And I don't wonder if that would be a good thing. So we tried that and it turned out to be a good thing. So in order to illustrate that, we decided to try to do it for you live. And so I've got the Sound City 100, I've got the old Deliverance 120, and I got the new Deliverance 120, and you will be able to see how they are of a piece, how the old model Deliverance and the new model Deliverance are, as we said, not really intrinsically different as far as the gain quality of it and the overdrive and blah, 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 blah. We just enhanced it a little bit. We just sweetened it a little bit, just fatten it up maybe a little bit. But with respect to the clean sound, it's decidedly different. And the other thing is that with the solo knob, you can actually apply those two changes, not just a foot switch that kicks on the more or less switch, but we also, in the original 120 and 60, when you went into the more mode, the voicing would automatically switch in the gain stage to give it more upper mid-range presence in the high gain mode to give it some zing. And then when you put it in the less mode, it would be kind of like on the edge of breakup, and if you turn the guitar down to clean it up, it would clean up, but it would still be a little thin. And so what we did was the voicing functions that took place behind the front panel, we brought that out on the front panel with the bright switch. We put that on the front and also tied that to the foot switch function. So now what you do is, in the more mode, in the less or more mode, you can make it brighter or not as bright on either mode, manually using the two gains and the master volume. If you want to change them on the fly, you can assign the more mode and the bright mode to the solo mode, so that you can leave them basically off in the low gain mode. And so when you back off the guitar, it's very big and full sounding. But then when you go into lead, you can add the gain stage and add the brightness, or just add the brightness, or just add the gain stage, and then set the volume of that with the solo volume and control that with your guitar. And now it's got a whole range of gradations of clean to gain that would be really hard to find on an amp that had separate channels to do that. It just it's designed to have a transition rather than be the lead channel, the crunch channel, the clean channel. Because when you compartmentalize it that way, players compartmentalize it that way here. And they don't think so much about the transition between all of those, between the clean and the rhythm sound, between the rhythm sound and the lead sound. They sort of tend to focus on those three features. and I call it, the clean crunch scream mentality.
Yeah.
Where you subdivide those mentally. You compartmentalize them.
How's your clean, dude? How's your crunch, dude?
Yeah,
what's your solo tone like, dude?
But real guitar players don't play real guitar that way. Everything is a gradation. Everything is a transition from one state to another, and that's been the great thing about the Deliverance, is people sort of get that. So this was, how do we get that and make it a foot switchable feature that still kind of requires you to be aware of that sort of transitional nature of the thing. So what I think I want to do first, well, there's a couple of different ways I can do it. I could either show you I could show you the Deliverance II fully blown, the old Deliverance and the new Deliverance. I'll do that. Let's start with the old Deliverance and the new Deliverance, just fully.
And we're just doing gainy stuff up front.
Full gain, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And
then we'll dive into clean later.
Yeah. And you'll see there's stuff going on there that's different, but it's not radically different. It's just subtle stuff, because most people like the way the gain behavior is. And that's what we want to try to preserve. But on the other hand, I did want a little bit more saturation and a little bit more mid, a little bit more, just slightly more forward on the mids, so that it would grab the string harmonics a little more. So that's what you hear. I just switched off the echo cancellation mode. So I'm going to switch to the mic so you won't hear my vocal mic anymore.
And then when you're switching amps, this would mean Deliverance I, and this is II.
And that's correct. Okay. I'm going to use headphones. It's easier for me to do it this way. So I'm going to turn off the monitors in here.
Okay, that's interesting to me. It sounds like the same amp with different EQ settings. Like, it sounds so similar. But my question is, do they feel similar? Like, how similar do they feel in the playing experience?
They're very close. You're right. They sound like the EQ is slightly different. The mid-range saturation on the new one is a little bit greater. It actually has a tiny bit more gain and a tiny bit more upfront in the mid-range, just a little bit. And to put it another way, the mid-range on the old one sounds a little bit blanketed. So what you hear is a little bit more detail on top, but not so much of the mid-range grab. And the reason for that is I wanted the the people that say that's kind of unforgiving and hard to play. A lot of times it's just because you are digging into the string a little harder to get the mid-range to come out, and that amp just didn't necessarily have that prominent mid-range, so people would tend to feel like that it wasn't saturated enough, even though it's more gain than you would ever really need.
Right.
But it's not the right kind of gain. So we tweaked the gain a little bit, and the tweaks to the power amp section to make it sound more robust on the clean sound kind of opened up the mid-range sort of response characteristics so that it comes out a little more. And Jeremy says the 2 sounds a bit brighter to him, which would be that would pretty much be the case because it's mostly in the mid-range, which translates as top end, and then Wayne says he heard more low end, but more mid-range actual. And when the mid-range goes up, the low end would sound slightly diminished in a situation like this one. You guys out there are hearing it because the picture is changing. The mid-range comes up, the bass sounds a little less prominent. But in this version, with a little bit more mids, we wanted to make sure that the bass didn't get lost. So it did come up. Actually, what happened was the depth control got a little bit more sensitivity so that it's a little tiny bit more active. So even though they're set approximately at the same place, the depth control on this one adds a little bit more to compensate for the mid-range coming up a little bit so that it doesn't sound like it dried out on the bottom. So knowing that, let's go back and fiddle around with it for just a second.
Yeah.
I'll switch back to 1. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little of the mid-range out of the 2.
Okay.
And turn the presence up a little bit, just so you can
On the 2.
Yeah. What did you hear?
That's far out to me. What? BMO.
Your more wife.
What was I going to say? They sound so similar on my end, just listening through my stupid laptop. And I thought I was going to hear a bigger difference because I have played those two amplifiers in the same room back to back. And it felt like a different experience to me.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Shall we?
And actually,
In the shop, we didn't have the power station on. Now, I have it set up to where both of them have the master volumes at a 10 o'clock. And that's starting to get into the power amp saturation. Anybody that has a Deliverance here knows that 9 o'clock is kill power. And 10 is like way, way kill power. Joe's got echo because I have the echo cancellation off while I'm playing. They're actually sounding closer together in this experiment because their power amp is saturating more because I've got the power amp greased a little bit and then it's going into the power station to attenuate it. So yeah, if I turn down, let's do it, shall we? If I turn down the master volume so that the power amp isn't crunching as much, I'll do that and you can tell me what you think. Okay.
what are we starting with?
Okay, so yeah, Chris, you're right. The new one has a little bit more body. That's what we were talking about. It has a little bit more low mid fatness and fullness. What I did was, so I turned down the master volume so the power amp isn't saturating as much, and then I turned up the presence on the 2 so it would sound crisper on the top like the old one does. The problem with the old one being crisper like that, it's hard to dial that crispness back when you're trying to get the medium sounds or the clean sounds, and we'll talk about that now. But I think what you guys are responding to is the more body and the more fullness of the new version. Those were all the things that we were trying to accomplish. Bring it out.
Yeah.
Bring out the string harmonics, the part that makes it easier to play. I'm actually not hitting the strings as hard as I usually do because it's easier to play. It's easier to play it that way, and play with restraint, not like lay into it all the time. That's why I chose that Montrose riff because it really shows you how the strings are behaving. Okay, so now let's talk about the clean sound between the two. And I think this is what's going to be really revealing for you guys, all right? So I'm going to go back to the 1, and I've turned them both to, I turned the original one to less mode.
Okay.
And I turned the new one to, I switched it out of the solo mode because I have the bright and the more mode assigned to the solo mode. So when I hit the foot switch and turn them off, it turns off both of those switches at the same time, essentially setting it the same way as the one, just by turning that switch off, right? Okay, that's where you really hear the dramatic difference in the behavior of the two.
And it feels different too when you're playing them. I can attest to that.
Yeah,
And
because it's
you know
all
what
right
it
there in
reminds
your
me of?
hands. It's right there in your hands. You don't have to manipulate the. I'm not even changing the guitar volume. I'm not backing the guitar volume up to clean it up any further. I'm leaving the guitar volume wide open, which makes
Yeah.
the old one sound a little fizzy, but the new one, the clean mode has more headroom and dynamic range, so you can get away with that.
They both sound great. What it kind of strikes me, sorry, I'm echoing, behind my stupid speakers here. It's like when you'd hear about, Warren DeMartini and George Lynch and, Michael Schenker talking about, oh, yeah, Warren had this one particular Marshall that was the magic stuff. And George tried to steal the head that Warren would never lend him. And then he took one home. He actually bagged it and left. And he's like, oh, this isn't the one. This wasn't the good one. Like, that's what it sounds like to me, is the Deliverance II is like the really killer example of the same thing. They have the same DNA. It's the same amplifier. But, man, when you switch over to the 2, it's like, yeah, it's got that extra kind of sweetness all around. The other thing too, and I hate to evoke this because it's such a kind of a typical thing that people talk about with Fryette stuff and the old VHT stuff. Is the Deliverance one definitely has a stiffer feel, drier, like then the 2 is juicier. It's just fucking juicier. And it was really cool when I got to play him, guys, because Steve had me play through the Deliverance Series I first. And I'm playing it and going, God, this is a great amp. I love this thing. I was, okay, cool. Then plug me into the 2. What do you think? And it was that same kind of thing, but even more exaggerated in person, because I got, not only the sonic results, but the tactile touch thing too. It was like, oh my God, yeah, the 2 is the shit. So, I mean, I think what everybody Wayne, you're cracking me up. So yeah, I mean, I want to know what everybody else thinks here too, but they both sound great to me. But the D2 has the magic sauce. I don't know if I sound badass with echo, Wayne, but that's funny. Have mercy. You need to play it with a peso, though.
So you can hear there that the that meaty thickness to be able to pull off the pinched harmonic ZZ vibe.
You need a peso.
Yeah. But that's the thing about enriching the mid saturation a little bit, allows you to get closer to that sort of vibe.
So what else is happening in there? Because to me, that mid range, it's also got more. It's wider. It's got more depth and dimension too. It's not just more mid range frequency. There's more stuff
I will
in there. There's more,
demonstrate where that comes from. I'm going to show you now. I'm going to show you the Sound City sort of clean DNA footprint, and then
God, I love this amplifier.
And then I'll switch over to the Deliverance II and show how that DNA was grafted into
Great.
the Deliverance DNA.
That sounds mighty fine. Hot damn.
Okay, turned off the echo.
Dude, when you
So-
played the Who on the Sound City,
Now, I'm going to throw you guys a monster fucking curve. But before I do that, so I have the Sound City. It's not set clean. The master is 3/4 of the way up. So we're getting a little power amp saturation. And why I did that is because I needed to be in the same sort of sonic realm as the other ones so that you could hear how they're different and how they're similar. And you could hear that the Deliverance had a little bit more saturation. Here's why. The Deliverance preamp is designed to cover the gamut from clean all the way to complete ridiculous 7-drop tuning.
right.
Shred. The Sound City is very purpose built for just that very narrow range of pretty to pretty fucking loud, and that's all you get. So it doesn't really require that sophisticated of the dynamic range or power amp behavior modification that happens when you switch modes in this amp. It doesn't need that because you don't use it that way. It doesn't have that capability, so you don't build that
It's
capability.
not the point of that amplifier.
It's not the point of that amp. The point was to show you that sort of clean and mid-range DNA, that projection of that, the thing that we learn from that to infuse into the new model to give it that character without destroying its original personality, right?
Mhm.
Now, the kicker. KT88 amp, EL34 amp.
Oh my God.
You didn't even think about that. And the reason you don't think about it is because you're not focusing on that. You're not thinking, wow, it's all about the EL34s, because it isn't about the EL34s. It's about the general sonic palette and how to manipulate that to make it work across different platforms. And this is why I always say, get your minds unhooked on the concept of power tubes sounding different and think about what makes an amp, a whole amp, behave holistically a way, this way or that way.
Dude, I am blown away. And I know these amps. I wasn't even thinking that. Okay.
So thank you for letting me pull out the carpet out from under you guys for that little.
Yeah, you pull it out from under me too. I have a question. I'm not quite sure how to formulate it, but Sound City comes along, and that was obviously, well, it's not doing it justice to call it a worthy experiment, but obviously you've brought forward the gifts that you learned from that project, and you've infused your own Fryette badged amps with some of the things that you learned from that. Would you?
It's not so much. It's not so much what you learn. It's what you don't focus on all the time until it comes.
Okay.
Until it's brought to your attention. Like,
Well, hot damn.
and this is part of the process. I mean, we're music freaks.
Right.
We're vinyl freaks.
They're just
We're
freaks.
history freaks. We're guitar freaks. You know,
Okay,
we're rock and
let me ask this question, though.
and those things don't all exist in your mind or in my mind or anybody else's mind. They don't all exist on the same plane. They take different. They adopt different. You adopt different perspectives about them at different points in time,
Yeah.
and at the time that some particular little piece of stew, you know, like a piece of the recipe, a salt or a spice or a kind of pepper or a kind of vinegar, you don't think about all the spices all the time. You open up the spice chest and you go, oh, you know what? I forgot we had cumin. I wonder what I could do with that. You know, and it's the same with just It might be on any given day that we're working on something and then come home and go, you know what, I haven't listened to this record. I forgot all about that. And you listen to it and then you go, oh, listen, that's the thing that I was thinking about, that I was trying to. So you get a chance to listen to it and get it in your head. Okay, the elements, in historically, you think, yeah, I love that tone. But then after you listen to all this stuff and work with it all the time, and then you go back and listen to it with that perspective, you go, I'm hearing a pick attack. I'm hearing a little low end slap thing, a slap back. I'm hearing something in there that never occurred to me to pay attention to before, because it just never occurred to me, But now I'm hearing it and I'm going, there's an element of that sound that is key to getting the whole sound. You don't get it unless you have that element. But you didn't even think about that element, because when was the last time you heard that song on the radio?
Pay attention to that. Yeah.
The last time you heard that song, you heard it on the radio on shitty speakers and blah, blah, and you hear it at home and you go, wow, listen to that woo. When he hits that note, it goes woo. And then you can, and then with this many years of experience of I know what's causing that. Ooh, it's the speaker slapping back because of the feedback, because of blah, blah, blah. And then you get to go back and try to make that happen again. And you go, okay, that's what that is. And it's those little elemental things. That's what makes this fun and exciting to do, is because you get to go back to those little elements and go, I wonder if I can turn that element up a little bit or down a little bit. And it's just.
Well, and I'm still going to ask my question, but just along those lines of what you're talking about, I remember, and we're going to talk about an amp that we've kind of chuckled about. And it's funny because the reason that I bought this amp was not the normal guys who were into it, but I picked up one of the first Tremaverb combos at one point. I think it was 1996 when I got it. And the reason I got it was because I heard Alan Holdsworth had been using the dual rectifiers. And I was in love with Alan Holdsworth at the time. Put the amp on layaway, finally got it home. I put it on layaway without even playing it. They had it used. I walked in, I wanted, I'll give you my money. And then, so I bring it home and I play through it. And it's the biggest disappointment. Like, this sounds nothing like anything. And I was so sad, and I just kind of stuck it in the corner for a few months. And this was like right at the beginning of me being able to really work as a musician. And I remember I got this, I was doing a session for this entire record, and I thought, hell, I'm bringing a couple of my other amps in. I'll bring this stupid Tremaverb amp, that I could never get a sound on. And, we're setting up to do some solo stuff, and the engineer says, well, hey, why don't we try this amp? I'm like, well, that thing kind of sounds like shit. I don't, he's like, let's just set up anyway. I've wanted to hear what one of these sounds like, and just stuck a 57 in front of it. And I walked into the control room. And by the way, this is when I didn't know anything about anything. I was completely, I walk into the control room and I hear it mic'd up in front of monitors. And then it sounded amazing. And it hit me, oh wait, this is an entirely different experience. And it kind of in a moment, it recalibrated my brain so that when I walked back out into the room and I listened to the amp in the room, I'm like, oh, now I know what that sounds like in front of monitors, which is how it's going to kind of sound like on a record. But I just could not, originally when I first heard the amp, I could not make the transition. Like, here's how it sounds in the room, and this is how it makes it to tape. It just sounded like a completely different animal. So anyway, that's a little aside. Now I want to ask my question.
I appreciate that. Let me just get one word in first.
Okay.
Reformed, and Wayne, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I know exactly what you're talking about. I just abhor watching people do interviews, engineer guys, tech guys, amp guru guys, talking like they want you to think that there's a reason that they're gurus, and so they talk like that. And my attitude is, why are we doing this?
Well, the whole point of the show is to not be
We're
that.
trying to make this stuff accessible to you and make it and bring you into our way of thinking, so that you can see that our way of thinking isn't really that different than your way of thinking. You guys are guitar players, you're performers, you're musicians, you're artists, and we're guitar players, we're performers, we're musicians, artists that just happen to be making amplifiers and sort of understand some of that stuff. But we understand it on the level that you could understand it if it was just explained to you that way, which is without all the mystique and the BS, like you say. The point is, it's science, and it's exciting, and it has legs, and it goes places, and it has a mind of its own sometimes, and you have to chase it around the room like an errant child. But at the end of the day, it's the same. We're talking the same language. We're talking about a different thing, but we're talking about the same language, which is being creative, which is listening to things, having the things that you hear influence the things that come out of you. You know, just like when you're influenced by hearing B.B. King. You want to learn how to play like B.B. King, and then you don't really want to be B.B. King. You want to have that flavor added, you know, in your quiver, to be able to pull up on demand, or to enhance, to bring something to your style of playing. You understand something about when you figure out what B.B. King is doing, or when you figure out what Johnny Winter is doing, or when you figure out what anybody is doing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to play like them. It means that you're going to glean something out of what you got by understanding what they're doing to apply to your own experience. And that's what makes you you. And that's what we're always have been trying to say. We're not trying to make the amp that so-and-so used, or so-and-so used, or so-and-so used, and that you're going to sound like those guys if you get that. We're not saying that. We're saying we're trying to distill all this stuff down in the same way that you do, so that when you encounter an amplifier that will allow you to experiment with that stuff, you can go, I can do that too. But I don't have to do that. I can take that and move it
right
to the next rung.
If you get rid of all the myth, you know, and
all
it's
the
like,
bias, all the,
you know, that what's that idiom, you know, truth is stranger than fiction. It's almost like, you know, like truth is more interesting than bullshit. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, we don't need all the bullshit. Like you strip that away and just deal with, actually, here's how you get those sounds. Here's actually what's happening with this amp. Here's actually
how you know you're reading an entire pile of canned BS is when you see the phrase military spec wire. As soon as somebody says they do anything military spec in an amplifier whose design is based in 1940s technology, you just like, that's the time to turn the page and move on, because you know you're talking to somebody that's talking down to you, and they're talking down to themselves because they're too stupid to even realize that they read it on somebody else's shit sheet, and they're regurgitating it too on theirs, because they think that's what they're supposed to do. They think that they're talking to you because somebody else talks to you that way. They're bullshitting you because they saw somebody else bullshit you and you ate it up. So I'm going to bullshit you the same way that they did, because you're obviously expecting that. And that's what happens.
Right. But it's like, it's kind of unintended bullshit.
It's unintended bullshit.
It's like we don't even know where it begins at this point anymore, you know?
Yeah. It's been going on so long.
What came first, the bullshit or the bullshit? I don't know.
Wow, I'm sorry. I really got on a roll on that one. But I mean, that's like every once in a while we touch on one of those things that just like made me goes, oh man, this is like, I got to get this out or else I'm going to explode. Sorry.
Okay, and I have to get this out. This is my question.
Okay.
If Sound City doesn't come along, the opportunity to do something under that name and kind of honor Dave Reeves in the way that you did, I think you really did. Do you ever build an amp like the Master 100?
Do you ever think about things that you do think about? No, I don't think about things that I don't think about. But that's it. That's what I was saying about plankton-free pickup magnets. I just read a story about I think it was in the new Premier guitar. They're talking about Leo Fender, and they're talking about the little bevel around the edge of the magnets on the early Strats.
Yeah.
And
that they kind of did later on in
well, why they did that. And the real reason why the magnet edges were beveled wasn't for some like tricky technical reason. They did it because when they were making the pickups, they had these little hammers and they would tap the magnet slugs into the coil former. And
I think you're right.
That ceramic magnet stuff is brittle.
Yeah.
And it would chip around the edges. So they beveled. There was some poor schlup whose job was to sit there and hand file an angled bevel on the edge of a slug of magnet because there was chips. There were little divots there to round it off.
That makes sense.
Which meant that every single magnet that got chiseled, that got filed around the edge was different than the other magnet.
Yeah.
And then
there was no
later
spec.
on, somebody, I think it was Seymour Duncan, but somebody actually researched the behavior of the magnet with the beveled corner, the beveled edge, and found that they had a distinct magnetic signature associated with that bevel that did make a thing happen. But it wasn't intentional, and they weren't trying to make that thing happen. And when they stopped doing it, nobody said, "Oh, we got to start doing that again because the guitars don't sound the same anymore." No, they were just like going, "Oh God, I'm glad we're not doing that with that stupid thing with that hammer anymore," and then paying some schlub to like file them off because that's just like the stupidest, most labor-intensive waste of time ever. And I'm glad we're not doing that. And then somebody comes along and goes, "You know what? That's why those guitars with those pickups have that distinctive behavior, because there is a distinctive behavior associated with that." But that was entirely accidental.
Huh. Wow.
And toxic. Oh yeah, that. Yeah. These are people that are sitting around in the factory with no air conditioning, with all the doors open in 90-degree weather with their shirts off, smoking.
Guys, yeah. And there's incredible footage. You can find it on YouTube of like just Super 8 cameras from the Fender factory from, I think it's 57, 58. Yeah. And it's like, man, people spraying shit with no masks. It's like, the male workers, like no shirt on, it's like
spraying nitrocellulose lacquer, which is like just damaging their lungs for life.
Oh, hell yeah. Smoking cigarettes.
Asbestos? Well, we didn't know.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's kind of gorgeous. It's really cool to watch that stuff. I've owned, I actually, believe it or not, I owned a 54 Strat for a while. I actually had a legit 54 Strat. And it was a body refin, so I could get it kind of at a player's price. But here's an interesting thing about that guitar was that when I got it, it had the original frets, and we measured the radius, and the radius was less than 7 inches. Like, it was so like, it wasn't spec. And so this guitar, I think the Strats actually shipped in October of 54, and the neck date on my guitar was July of 54. And I think the earliest Stratocasters date to March of 54. So this was like a pre-release Strat that I had for a while. The neck pickup sounded like God. The rest of the guitar was okay. I still own a 57 Strat that kind of kicks the 54's ass in every way. But yeah, anyway, that's my my vintage Fender stuff. So fun.
There's still Nashville Flood jokes going around. It's just like,
oh, what's this?
That's the reason.
Oh, yeah, totally.
After the flood, yeah. Ugh, God.
Oh, you worked in cabinet factories.
We had a 292 power amp and a 252 power amp from the band Chicago Keith Howland, the guitar player
In the flood?
that were in their storage unit in Nashville that ended up sitting on the bottom of the river for 2 weeks.
Hey.
And so they called us up and we need the guitar tech calls up and says, we need an evaluation. We need a document from you guys. We need a letter attesting to the value of those amplifiers for insurance. And I'm like, what's this about? Oh, our amps were stored in you've heard of the flood. I go, yeah, I heard of the flood. Oh, was your stuff in that? Yeah, our stuff was in that, and it's underwater. And I'm like, send them here.
Let's do this.
We don't want to send them. We're going to spend money shipping them and blah, blah, blah. And they're just going to get thrown in the garbage, So just tell us how much they're worth. I said, no, send them to me.
That's so you.
They sent them, and we made a video tape. We made a video of us opening them up, taking them apart, hosing them down with a water hose, and then taking it completely apart, soaking the parts in a dishpan of distilled water, which doesn't have trace elements in it, right? Lime deposits and all that stuff, and we built them all, put them all back together, and fired them up, and just to show people that everything that you thought you knew about parts, circuit boards, water, mud, under sockets, tubes, and everything that you thought you knew about it is wrong. And here's proof. We took them apart, cleaned them up, put them all back together with all the original parts and just new tubes. And they went out and they toured with them. And we did it to them. We did it for them for free, just for the opportunity to make that video. And then a few years later, a guy did the same thing. He had a 292 that was in a fire. And same thing. We needed an evaluation for insurance. And can you send it? And he sent it. It was like full of foam and ash and all kinds of shit inside. And we cleaned it. Yeah. The fire retardant foam. Yeah. It had fallen. It had been blown across the floor with a fire hose through a hole in the floor and landed on the floor below it.
Holy shit! Wow.
And it was covered with foam and soot and shit. And I'm like, send it. And we made a video of that. There's a series on our we did it on Facebook, but you can find all the videos. It's called Reanimating the 292 Power Amp. You can find it on the YouTube of us taking this thing all apart and putting it back together with all the original parts and saying, you want to talk about heat, you want to talk about circuit boards burning, you want to talk about reliability, you want to talk about parts that can't take this, that can't take that can't take heat, that can't take blah, 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 blah. Watch the video and shut up and learn. It was just like such a great opportunity. And I'm just like going, thank you, God. That was just like, you couldn't have given me a bigger gift. It was just handing it to you.
That's straight up malcontent, Steve.
That's straight up.
That's straight up malcontent. It's like, we're not doing this the easy goddamn way. Like, send this thing back.
Yeah, you can put it. Yeah, Brendan. Yeah, exactly. So I can wear a power station across my chest if shit hits the fan. Is that what you're saying? That's exactly what I'm saying. You can take it. You can take it to the next insurrection and be protected against the idiots.
Oh man.
Thunder and lightning storm, dogs freaking out. Pick this up later. See you, PJ. Glad to have you around.
PJ, I want to be where you are. We get no thunder and lightning here in LA, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, I want to hear thunder and lightning, and I want to have animals jumping up and hiding under the bed and doing all that.
Hell yeah, man. I want interaction with nature. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because if we get interaction with nature out here, it's going to suck.
Yeah.
It's going to be the rumble quality.
It's going to be the law of unintended consequences.
Yes, it will. Where were you during the Northridge quake? Did that?
I was in Studio City. You probably saw some of those pictures in the valley of the apartment building that had collapsed on top of cars in the parking structure underneath?
Yeah, the soft
That
first
apartment
floor.
building was around the corner from where I lived.
No.
And our apartment didn't sustain any damage. And right around the corner, an apartment building collapsed on all the cars in the
Oh,
parking
that's so
structure
sad.
below it. That
Uh,
was wild. That was wild. I've got pictures of that. I've got pictures of my apartment with everything in my living room, pictures on the walls, and everything just ended up being in a pile in the middle of the living room. Furniture, everything was just like in a pile in the
That's
middle of the living room.
interesting that you say that. One of my best friends, he lived next door to this couple that were hoarders, and
Oh,
it's not nice. So they
the
were
minute you
in
said
their
the word
bed.
hoarders, I knew it couldn't have been nice.
Yeah, so they were in their bed, and they had shit piled up to the ceiling on the side of their bed, and it fell on them and killed them. All their crap.
When that happened, I was in bed, and so I had a TV in the bedroom, and I had an entertainment center that the TV was sitting on top of.
Okay.
So I'm on my bed, and I feel it shaking, and then shaking more, and then really effing shaking.
Now, how long did that take?
Just a minute.
Okay.
And so I'm laying there, and this was what I said. This is what came out of my mouth in that minute.
I'm going to make the power station.
No, it was shit. Shit. Fuck. Boom, 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 boom. Stuff keeps flying. Like every single car alarm in the whole block went off. Every single dog in the whole neighborhood were barking their heads off. It was unbelievable. And my refrigerator moved out from the corner of the kitchen out into the middle of the kitchen.
Holy
and the
crap.
door opened, and everything that was in the refrigerator shot out of the refrigerator and slammed on the wall. So I had 3 or 4 bottles of red wine. So all the walls in the kitchen were like painted red. Oh man, it was unbelievable. And I have photographs of that still. It was just like,
wow.
and my phone didn't work. I had a landline, and I picked it up, and there was no dial tone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I picked it up. I thought I'd, call my mom in Seattle, tell her I was okay. And I couldn't get a line out, and so I just I gave up. I hung up the phone, and then it rang. And I picked it
there
up.
was no dial tone?
There was no dial tone, so I put the phone down, and then it rang, and I picked it up, and it was our distributor in Japan. So, are you okay? I was like, I can't even get a call out, and I got a call in from Japan, from Tokyo.
Wow.
What the hell? And they're like, oh, I just dialed your number. Unbelievable. It was like the freakiest thing. There's a whole bunch of freaky
do you
things that went
remember
on.
the aftershock situation? Were there many?
Yeah, that didn't bother me. This was just like a few days before NAMM.
Oh.
So our factory at the time was out in Thousand Oaks, and they didn't get hit too bad. But the really interesting thing was I went out to check out the factory, and nothing got damaged out in the factory, but every desk and file cabinet drawer was open. But nothing got damaged. Nothing got dropped. Nothing fell off of any shelves. Nothing. But all the drawers and all the desks and file cabinets were open, like all the way out. And they're all aiming different directions. So there was just like weird Twilight Zone stuff like that we just kept stumbling. And of course, a couple of days later, we got to go to NAMM, and people were already here from.
They still did NAMM. They still held NAMM.
Well, everybody was already here.
Wow.
People from Italy and France and Germany and UK and Japan and everywhere else. Do
you remember what you were displaying that year?
Yeah.
The Pittbull.
Yeah, I've got a picture of it. We were doing we had power amps. We had the Pittbull. We had the 45 combo, and
wait, what year was that? Was that 94?
92.
92.
Yeah, so we were pretty fresh into it at the time. We had stacks and stacks of stuff, and everybody in that show was just like walking around like all jumpy, you know. And it's like normally at an amp show when somebody hits a snare drum, it's like, oh, some asshole's hitting a snare drum. This time when somebody hit a snare drum, everybody jumped straight up in the air, you know.
It's
It was
going,
like,
no,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
Oh man.
John, you remember that, huh? He was at NAMM, and he said that the escalator stopped after an aftershock. You know, when you were right in the middle of it like that, the aftershocks, you don't even feel them. That's like getting hit in the face with a frying pan and then somebody blows in your ear. Did you feel somebody blow in your ear? You know, no.
Yeah.
I didn't notice any aftershocks. I just remember that there was people in my apartment building crying and all that, and I had one good bottle of red wine left in the refrigerator, so I pulled it out and I opened it up, and I had some coffee cups, and I took all the coffee cups I had, 3 or 4 of them, 4 or 5, and I put wine in each one, and I came downstairs from my apartment, and people are hugging and crying and blah blah blah, and I handed each person a coffee cup of wine, and I said, it's not that bad. Why don't we just make a party out of it? And they were like,
that.
what is wrong with you? I said, what else are we going to do?
That's what you do. What the hell else are you gonna do?
And one of the guys went, yeah, that's what you do. And he grabs his coffee cup and throws down his wine. And there was a gay couple. There was this really nice gay couple that lived in the building, in the apartment just below mine.
Yeah.
And they were all kind of nervous. And when I came down and started handing out the wine, and the one guy of that couple, he all of a sudden he got inspired. He got a little backbone, and he turned to his mate and he says, you check the crystal and I'll turn off the gas. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing. That was just, he just like, I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
And so he sent his partner back into the apartment to make sure that the crystal wasn't damaged. And he went around the back with a wrench to check to make sure that the gas was turned off.
Oh,
it was great. So we actually ended up just making some fun out of it, because what else can you do? But it was pretty intense. That was very intense.
I mean, I've been out here for 12 years and you know, obviously nothing big, but that's kind of scary because at some point it happens.
Brendan, no, that's not true. Pittbull came from Hiwatt had a model called the Bulldog, a 112 combo. And I wanted to build an amp that would beat a Bulldog. And I asked around and I said, what's tougher than a Bulldog? And somebody said, a Pittbull. And I went, all right. And Hiwatt was spelled with 2 T's, and the Bulldog logo, you know, had 2 L's, and it looked cool. So I named the first model Pittbull, and I spelled it with 2 T's because I liked the way it looked on the Hiwatt logo. There you go.
And so the Cuban artist Pittbull was named after the VHT amp, the Pittbull. Put that on Wikipedia. Make an edit.
Yeah, but he only uses 1 T.
Well, it's because he's wrong.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Actually, it was really funny because we had a guy administering our trademark stuff, and he dropped the ball and let the Pittbull trademark lapse.
That's not.
And I got a notification from the Patent and Trademark Office that our Pittbull trademark was in danger of lapsing, and I got my attorney and went, "You better get on this. What are you talking about? What are you doing letting the Pittbull trademark lapse?" And he's like, "Oh." So he goes back and tries to get it reinstated. Well, Pittbull, the artist, tried to block us.
No way!
Yeah, he did.
Hot shit.
He took it up because they thought they were going to like make some iPhone app or something like that, some audio thing, right? And it was related with music and amplifiers, and so they tried to glom onto it, and we went back to them. Our argument was that we had first use, we had demonstrated use, we were still using it actively in the market, and blah blah blah, and it was spelled differently, and the trademark office went, yeah, you're right, you're good, and they denied Pittbull our trademark, trying to squeeze his ass into our trademark.
Wow.
That's what people do. You got to watch it.
And it's not him. It's his freaking lawyer team or whatever.
The Wayne, the Pittbull, the Bulldog combos that were pre Audio Brothers. Electronics were made well, but the little thing, the piece of wood that you bolt to the top to the chassis and slide it in the back, that was pretty lame. But the amplifiers, the pre-Audio Brothers Pittbull combo, Bulldog combos were built as well as any of them. It was later. It was Audio Brothers and later the Chinese version of the thing that were really god awful. So just to sort of put a timeline, all that for you guys that are watching that.
So Steve,
yes, sir.
The law of unintended consequences. That's a thing.
Why don't you take off on this for a while? Because
I don't know what I'd say, but what I'm thinking about right now is how it relates to you and your wares, and this idea. Like when I think of what you've put into the marketplace, one of the things that's like, even early on with your amplifiers, you kind of got pigeonholed as, the chugga chugga Ferrari metal, like Steve Fryette builds metal amps, and that's what they do, and that's all we're looking to them for. That's the Fryette sound. And when you listen to you actually play guitar, when you learn about your history as a musician, when you hang out with you as a dude, like, I don't know, maybe you can play metal, but that's certainly not what comes out naturally. So you were building these things, you were putting them out into the marketplace, and then they were sort of being repurposed because they could do that job really well, obviously, but that wasn't your original intention when you put them out into the marketplace.
It's really interesting that the Guitar and Bass, Guitar und Bass magazine in Germany.
Guitar, yeah. Hey, I'm grabbing water while you start this.
He did that magazine ran an interview with me that I didn't even realize was an interview. They sent me some questions, and I thought it was going to be about something else. It ended up they put together a 2.5-page interview with me with the questions that I had answered to them. And one of them is, the guy was really cool. It was like, hey, I've checked all over videos of you, the internet, like other previous interviews you've done, your history and blah, blah, blah. I don't see anything connecting you to metal or like your interest in metal. I don't see any of that. How is it that your brand is so associated with metal? You seem like a classic rock blues oriented guy, and the answer was, it was just pure coincidence. First of all, the Pittbull amp was the first product to be designed with the intention of releasing it. But the power amp was the first product to be designed that actually made it into production based on immediate demand first. And so once I made the prototype of the 2150 power amp and we showed it to some people, they just glommed onto it immediately, and a lot of different guys were using it. All the guys that were building rack systems or interested in rack systems wanted a 2150 power amp. And these were all manner of guitar players, every kind of guitar player, jazz guys, R&B guys, hard rock guys, medium rock guys, metal guys, sidemen. I mean, REO Speedwagon was Styx, Cher, the guitar player for Cher, was his touring rig. The guy, the guitar player for Barry Manilow, and Michael Thompson, and Mike Mike Landau, and Dwayne Bailey, who was formerly played with the Silver Bullet Band, and then he started playing with Chicago. So he was touring with Chicago. So he was using a 2150. So him and those guys, and Lukather, and all these guys, those guys were using the 2150 before the hard rock and metal guys discovered it, which was just like a year later, because all these well-known session and touring guys were using it and talking about it and mentioning it in interviews and so on and so forth. So those guys started coming around to the rack experts in LA to get racks built and to get the gear that everybody else was using in their racks. And that's when the things started happening with Megadeth and Metallica and Living Colour and Dokken and every kind of every metal band that were out there started using them. And then when they started using them, that's when the thing really broke open and became sort of metal oriented. And then our amps came out after that. And then some of those guys started using the amps. And they were primarily more metal guys. But I mean, guys like Carlos Rios, who a very respected, jazz rock guitar player. I mean, he played with lots of different kinds of bands. He played with jazz people. He played with
Gino Vanelli.
Yeah.
Gino Vanelli and Chick Corea.
And a more sweetheart of a human being you would not find anywhere. Carlos was just I built pedal boards for him when I was at Valley Arts, and he became a client later. And he was just one of those guys. He got one, and then he told all of his guys, all of his buddies, and all of his fans, guitar players that looked up to him, you got to get this. And all of those guys contributed to that success. And the metal part of it happened later, to where we had, Megadeth and Metalhead and or Metallica and those guys. And Metallica never really talked about their gear. They were going through some changes and stuff, but they used the 2150 power amps on the Black Album. And
wow.
And if you get the Black Album box set with the video showing the making of it, you can see it in the racks in the studio when they're recording. And they didn't talk about it because they were starting to build a relationship with Mesa. And they used the stuff, but they didn't talk about it. And then they eventually changed. Alice in Chains.
It just seemed... I mean, being just a guitar dork in my bedroom looking at guitar magazines, during that time, it just seemed like if you had a rack, that's what needed to be in there. That was that. That was anchoring the rack, like everybody who was anyone.
Yeah, well, Dave Jordan, who produced the first Jane's Addiction records, and I was talking specifically about the Dirt
too.
I didn't mention STP yet because Dean uses the classic power amp, and we hadn't gotten to that yet. He was using the classic power amp, not the 2150, and so that started another group of players using a slightly different version of the 2150, which was the classic power amp, which was 8 EL3/4, which we did the 30th anniversary limited edition of last year. But Dave Jordan was he produced Jane's Addiction and Alice in Chains and a bunch of different bands. And he had two 2150s of his own. He was a friend of mine. I'd worked on it with him on some other projects. So we were buddies. Hey, Shay. I love seeing your cat.
Me too.
So he had two 2150s of his own in his rack at Eldorado, in his stationary rack in the control room at Eldorado. And when you hired Dave Jordan to produce your record, you were hiring him to tell you that you were going to be using 2150 power amps on your record, period, the end. There was no discussion about it. You just used them. Biohazard and all these different bands, they all recorded with 2150s because they had to, because that's what Dave told them they were going to use. And he had that kind of clout at the time, and he used them. And Alice in Chains had two 2150s that they toured with, and their guitar tech kept blowing them up by hooking them up wrong all the time. and that caused a little rift between us and the band because we kept trying to tell Cantrell, your guy is setting them up wrong. He goes, these things aren't reliable. They keep blowing tubes. Your guy's setting them up wrong. Let us come down and show you how to set them up right, and you'll never have any problems with it. And he was really busy with his drug habit at the time, and he wasn't listening, and it didn't give a rat's ass. He just wanted his rig to work, and he didn't know who was telling him the truth, and he didn't care. He had it in his mind that it's this way and blah, blah, blah. And but when they recorded with Jordan, they were using 2150s because they were using Jordan's 2150s. And I know that for a fact because Jordan told me that. So I showed him the magazine where Cantrell said that they used Hafler power amps in the recording of the album. I showed him that, and he just like, what's wrong with those guys? He says, they didn't use those. He says, I swear to you, they didn't use them because I know what they were using because they were using my power amps. And, so we had stuff like that going on. But this just, this was just the way that, when we talked about this before, it's just the way the industry works. People say things, they see things a certain way, they get it in their head that that's the way it is. The people that run the magazines, they tell it that way. They reinforce these things that aren't factual, and it's really difficult to fight that. That's the thing that I really like about European guitar magazines, is they tend to go to the source, and when you tell them a fact, they will go out and work on their article, and then they'll come back and say, you said this, but so-and-so said this. So there's a disconnect between what you're telling us and what somebody else is telling us. What is your response back to that?
That's not going to happen in America, man.
That doesn't happen here, but it happens there. And there was 3 or 4 times when I had somebody in a German guitar magazine come to us either by mail or by a phone call or by a meeting at NAMM or by a meeting at the Frankfurt show. When I would get to Frankfurt, somebody would come by our booth, and they'd be like a writer for one of the magazines, and they'd say, we want to have a meeting with you. And I'm like, okay. So we do have a meeting, and we'd go in the office and sit down and have a meeting, and we would go through some of this stuff. You're saying this, your marketing material says this, so-and-so says this. What's your story on this? And
that's journalism.
We would tell them, okay, this is what was going on, and this is what changed, and blah, 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 and this is why we say this, and they changed and did this later, but at this point in time, this is what, and they were like going, okay, we did a little bit of research, and what you're saying lines up with what we discovered, so great. And so they would run they would run our story. And, that was just like, I just expected that to be happening all the time, but it only happened in European magazines, specifically German and French magazines.
Hey, would you mind telling that story that you shared with me a couple weeks ago when you were talking about, I think it was a German distributor who was, you were talking to another, you were talking to someone else, and you just saw him out of the, your peripheral vision. He was like looking over, I think the SIG X was out at the time, and he's like looking over like super fine details of the cosmetics of the amplifiers, and you're having this conversation, but you see him doing his thing, and then he comes over to you and says, "Do you remember the story? What I'm talking about?"
Yeah, that
this.
was our German distributor.
This is so like just a non sort of
American
perspective.
The sales manager at our German distributor who came to Frankfurt every year. His name was Jürgen Clear. Really great guy. Just a no bullshit guy. Guy.
Love that.
He was great. He'd always tell me who the people he trusted and who he didn't trust. And he smoked like like the guy in Hogan's Heroes. He smoked just like that. Like this. Stevie, I want you to know, like the guy over there, he's an asshole. Total asshole. ESSHOLE. I just loved it.
An asshole.
Hey, Jürgen, I just had a conversation with that guy. He seemed pretty cool. Yeah, Stevie, he's an asshole. So we had a great relationship. I love that guy. He retired, but what a fun guy. And he would tell me straight. He'd say, yeah, I think and we have to talk about the quality. Why is this like this? And blah, blah, blah. And we would find things that needed improvement, and we would work together to improve things. And then one time he comes to the booth and he's like checking everything out meticulously while I'm having a conversation with somebody else. And afterwards I talked to him, hey, Jürgen, how you doing? He goes, I'm great and I'm very happy. I said, oh, why are you very happy? He says, I'm happy to know that you're going to live a long time. And I said, why do you say that? He says, because I looked upon your cabinets and I see some little flaws like in the nameplate and a little bit of flaws in the vinyl that I never would have seen from you before. And I think it's good. And I said, why is that good? He says, because now I know that you're not going to kill yourself trying to make the quality so good that nobody will ever see it, but it will kill you. I'm like, well, that's really the long way around to say live long and prosper, but
yeah.
But that was,
that's a neat perspective.
It's a beautiful perspective, and I will never forget that conversation.
Yeah.
Even to this day, we'll have like a little flaw in something that the other guys on the team, the other people on the team will pull me over and go, we got a real problem here. And I'm like, okay, what's the problem? And they're like pointing out this thing. And I'm like, let it fly. Nobody will ever see it. And
well, I was privy to one of these discussions the other week. That was interesting.
Yeah. Well, when there's somebody from the outside, it's perfect because we'll say, look at that and tell me what's wrong with it.
But I'm watching this heated discussion about something that is so infinitesimally small. Like, and I'm looking at it and like
all hands on deck, all work has come to a grinding halt.
Absolutely. All fucking hands on deck. Like this needs addressed, yo. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, I don't know what you're talking. And then they point it out. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I can see that now. It ain't a thing. But somebody on the team's like kind of pissed, like we're not gonna change because of this. Right?
Well, the beauty of that is that came
I think it's awesome.
It came from me because I used to be that way. I used to be like, heads are gonna fucking roll over this.
But you have to be.
I have to be
to ascend to that level,
and that trickles down. But it doesn't just trickle down; it grows in intensity because I understand where I think the cutoff point is. So if I establish a standard, and within that standard, there's going to be some room to negotiate that standard. Only I know what that is. because I'm the only one that would react to it going out of some imaginary boundary that I've set up here, but I couldn't possibly transmit to anybody else because there's no way to articulate it, right?
Right,
And it's just a feel thing.
Yeah.
And it'll change based on whether it's a margarita hangover or a wine hangover, or, I mean, so, or parts didn't show up on time, or so it's malleable, right? So somebody has to come. So it's great that when you come in and you see this, what do they call it? The scrum. It's the scrum.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's yes, it's no, it's yes, it's, and then I have to come back and say, okay, the amount of energy that you just like expended on the scrum is like 10 orders of magnitude greater than the problem that you're discussing, right? Mm-hmm. That just happens, and that's because people give a shit, and that's great. Mm-hmm. But at some point, somebody has to go, okay, let's disperse, guys. This isn't worth that much energy, and we'll just prove it to you. Hey, Joe, show me what's wrong with this X. And you're like, and
I'm like, I can see different, but wrong? No, there's nothing wrong here. But then
first you have to know where to look.
and that, I was like, I don't know. But what I thought was great was that I know your quality control level, your personal level, but watching other people on your team have it stick in their craw, even when you're feeling like, well, yeah, we can let this go. I mean, that's pretty neat.
Well, I think
how valuable is that?
I think it's one key person recognizing that I can't always be the one that's there to observe that. Mm-hmm. So somebody else has to shoulder some of that responsibility, right? And so they're going to do their damnedest to do that, and they may overinterpret it and maybe be more intense than I am about it, to the point where I have to go, no, come back.
Yeah, but it's also pretty cool having a business where that's actually welcomed and encouraged. Like,
that was going on. That was going on at Fender during the transition between the pre and post CBS. There's stories about that where the CBS people were coming in and going, no, that's good, and the people on the assembly table were like,
no.
Leo would whip me with a West fucking towel if I let that slide,
Mm-hmm.
and they would try to let it slide, and they know that they were going to get whipped, but when somebody else comes along and says, no, that's okay, they're like, well, hey, wait a minute, I didn't get my whipping, It's almost like the dynamic change, and they feel that something's wrong here. I'm not getting my whipping.
How in the hell do you let go of that standard when you've been training that standard? Like, you feel like you're being, a bad person. Like, we know how to do this right, and now you're kind of saying it's okay to not do it right.
It's
that's bad news.
There's this concept called the escalation of standards.
Okay. What about the escalation of standards?
Where the intensity of the attention to a particular standard increases just automatically if you say that this is a point of contention that needs to be paid attention to. Mm-hmm. Again, without knowing how that came to be a point of contention in the first place, and what level of attention needs to be applied to it because it came from me and I arbitrarily decided that that's not good enough, until I did literally just decide I can't just bash my head against the brick wall over this anymore, because this is a standard that's unsustainable to that microscopic level. Because like in a zinc casting, on a silk screen job, that everything, you know, the thickness of wood, everything has a tolerance. All right. So your standard of excellence has to operate within a tolerance that's reasonable for humans to be able to recreate consistently, right? So when
That's tricky though.
when they fall out of that, that range of just industry accepted sort of range of tolerances, then you get to say something. But if it's within this range, and then you go to somebody like a sheet metal fabrication place and say, you know, this is like 30 seconds of an inch space in here, and it's supposed to be a 64th of an inch. And then their engineer guy is going to come out, hey, your drawing right here says plus or minus 0.001%. That's within the tolerance that you're calling out. So according to your own drawing, that's correct. And I'd have to go, oh, never mind. You know, sometimes you just sort of like find yourself zeroing in on, I do it, everybody does it, zeroing in on an object to the point of silliness. And you have to just like let go.
Yeah, that's
because you're never gonna, if you've got 5 of them to get out, maybe you can afford to be that anal retentive. If you've got 20 of them to get out, you could probably hold to that for a while, but you're going to spend a lot of time staring at them. When you got 500 to give out, it's just physically humanly impossible to.
Well, but sometimes the people who wind up being the revolutionaries are the people who had that almost, I would call it, lack of perspective, and kind of, you know, maybe are narcissistic enough, like it has to be this particular way, and they become kind of the titans of a particular movement. You know, for some reason right now I'm thinking of, you know, low-hanging fruit like Steve Jobs. And then you hear like what a complete asshole this guy was to work for, because he wouldn't, you know, like tolerances. What tolerances? There's perfection, and then there's unacceptable.
Everything else, yeah.
And we're going to do this, and this is what we're doing, and that's that. And if you don't do this, then you get yelled at, or you get fired, or you get berated, or, you know, whatever it is.
But see, yeah, but you know, and you never, that's an important component to have operational at all times. You just have to know when to push and when pushing. For example, on a piece of sheet metal that gets powder coated, if there's a flaw in the powder coat on the side that nobody sees,
yeah,
we would let that flaw slide. Why? Because if we don't let it slide, one of 2 things have to happen. One of 3 things. You give it back to the manufacturer of the metal part and tell them that it's a defect. If it's 1, they'll just say, fine. They'll throw it away and they'll credit you that 1 piece. If it's 10, they'll try to rework them. If it's 100, they'll take the whole batch and strip them all down and do them over again. The problem is caustic chemicals to strip powder coat paint off of steel leaves little pits in the steel. So the next time they powder coat them, the coating isn't going to be quite as smooth as it was the previous time.
Interesting.
So are you going to sacrifice the finish of the entire part over the little tiny flaw on the part that nobody sees? No, that's crazy. So there, you learn where the lines are, but still at the same time, everybody is watching, because there are the times when they're watching when there really is a serious error. Like, so we just got the panels, the front panels, the control panels on the Deliverance. And we thought that the supplier had made the cabinets wrong because the text was up underneath the top edge of the cabinet where it overhangs the text. And we're like going back to him and we're measuring that opening, and it was like, you're not making it right. I'm making it to the drawings, measuring it. And it turns out that the supplier of the panels shifted silkscreen a 1/16 of an inch.
Oh,
And that's why the text is under the edge, not because the
Yeah.
cabinet was made. So we went back
Yeah.
to the panel supplier and said, hey, you're moving the silkscreen. It's got registration marks. It's supposed to be exactly like this. Why is it moving a 16? That's way off tolerance. And they're like,
Yeah.
yep, you're right. It's way off tolerance. Send them over. We'll do them over again. You know, there's this. That's the thing about finding the right suppliers too, is when somebody makes a mistake, they got to own it, and then you move on. And if they
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
and if they tell you you're an asshole and fuck off, then and they're wrong, then you got to go look for another supplier. And so there's that. We're
That's interesting, Jeremy. I knew a guy who he actually had the office. He said his office was directly under Steve Jobs' office. This buddy of mine, his gig was writing the instruction manual, I think, for Final Cut Pro. And his dad was actually the guy who invented TCP, which is no small thing. Yeah, Chris, Jobs wasn't perfect though. Yeah, I certainly wasn't saying that. I'm almost saying like the opposite. Like people, like a lot of people who move stuff forward have a complete lack of perspective and like aren't interested in working with other human beings in any sort of kind of like constructive sorry, I've been drinking. I don't know what word I'd use. It's just complete tunnel vision. I have my vision. This is best. Everybody needs this in their life, and that's what needs to happen. And I will, ration the amount of abuse that needs to happen in order to bring my vision about. And I mean, I'm not a fan of that, but certain things have happened in our lives that are kind of a result of these people who kind of refuse to compromise or even interact with other human beings as if other human beings were worthwhile. So I don't know. It's a tricky situation, but
somebody
Steve,
asked,
were you about to say that it's getting towards 3 hours?
yeah. Somebody mentioned that somebody mentioned that if we ever made a tube preamp, and we did, it was the GP. Now he knows because somebody else answered him. It's the GP3, and somebody else asked if we would do custom one-off work, and we rarely do that because it really sort of depends on what it is. But when somebody's asking us to do something custom that's not really like our bag to do, kind of not our bailiwick, we don't do it because it's not our bailiwick. There are some custom things that we might do that sort of fit into our way of doing things, and it can be sort of reasonably accomplished for a reasonable amount of money. Yeah, we might try that. There's some things that get in the way of that. Right now, we're at a point where we've got this level of efficiency and sort of a synchronicity within the factory with the team. Like we said, it's kind of it's a compact situation. It's a small team. Everybody works together really effectively. And that doesn't leave any leeway to squeeze oddball projects in there. If we're going to do something off script, that's going to take some time and attention to detail and requires buying parts at quantity that we don't have in inventory, then we can't really do that unless we're thinking that it'd be worth making 100 of them. So we've never really been a one-off shop, and we're not a one-off shop. And especially now, we are the farthest thing from a one-off shop, although we have done one-off things every once in a while when they can reasonably accomplish without a lot of angst. But
well, I think you'd like to do it if you could, but I mean, you're back. I mean, you have so much stuff constantly to turn out that's on the normal docket. I mean, there's just no room for that sort of thing.
There isn't a toothpick's worth of space of anybody's time to do anything off script, and it's been that way for 2 years, and that's including the downtime of COVID, because during that downtime, we spent the time chilling out and recharging for the time that we were going to be back up, And there was design and engineering stuff going on and customer support stuff going on. And there were things going on anyway, even though we were closed. We were still interacting with suppliers, anticipating when we were going to start and what parts we were going to need when we got back and blah, blah, blah. So even then when we were down, we were anticipating being up and operating towards the day that we were going to be back up and running again, and how we were going to be accomplishing that, and how were we going to conform to state rules and regulations about how to operate and all that kind of stuff. There was just a ton of things to do on the administrative side. So now it's all administrative and production and meeting deadlines and not being able to meet deadlines because suppliers' deadlines are going out the windows for all the reasons that we and everybody else have been discussing for the last 6 months. It's just nuts out there. But it's nuts, but the demand is not abating. So instead of not doing anything, we have to do what we can do today. And what we can't do today gets put aside, and we'll take another shot at it tomorrow. And if we can't do it tomorrow, then it gets put aside and we'll take another shot at it a week later and see where is a ship, where is a part, where is a manufacturer's lead time, where is this, where is that. There's all kinds of things that are there, and it's so the dynamics are so all over the place that everything is just changing daily. Our way of operating our business shifts from day to day based on whatever information that we can gather out there about what happened today in the logistics side of things, in the production side of things, in the manufacturing side of things, whether one of our suppliers got shut down because one of their employees tested positive for the variant.
Yeah.
And we thought that we were going to get 100 chassis, and now we're not going to get shit. There is gear shifting going on a daily basis like nobody's business. And so whatever is going on, whatever you think that we're late on right now, you're waiting for power stations, you're waiting for power loads, you're waiting for Deliverance, you're waiting for 412 cabs, you're waiting for Fane speakers and blah, blah, blah. And you're waiting for the GPDI for us to start talking about when the GPDI is going to start happening. You want to know, you've heard about the Ultra Lead, which we talked about at the previous NAMM show that we attended, which was NAMM 2020, which was at the end of 2019, just before COVID started. We started shooting our mouth off about the Ultra Lead, and then the whole COVID thing got in the way of that, but we still want to do it. Is that happening and when? And it is happening, and I don't know when. So all of that stuff.
But there's more. There's more
all of that
you
stuff.
want to do.
And then there's the 10 projects that we haven't even started talking about yet, because if we shoot our mouth off, we're fucked. Because you're going to ask when that's going to be ready. Right. And we're not going to have any clue. So there's all kinds of fun, exciting, twisted stuff going on here that we don't even dare open our mouths about.
Yeah.
And we have to sit here. We don't have to. We enjoy it. But we put together the show basically to get some of this stuff off our chest so you guys understand what we're going through and what we're trying to do and what we mean to do and intend to do when we say we're going to do something. We really are. We don't know when, but or we know this, or we don't know that. All of those things. This is kind of part of what the show is just to sort of give you something of an idea of the course of this thing. It's just as much a mystery to us as it is to you guys sometimes. So I think we actually accomplished quite a bit, and we didn't we didn't go insanely long this time. We went half an hour longer than we planned, but we're going to get out of here a half an hour sooner than we did last time. So that's progress.
We're learning. We're figuring it out.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
And guys, we love that you keep coming back and demanding to get beat on more with all this verbiage and all this stuff. And
guys are
love the questions and your feedback, and love being able to do these sort of impromptu demonstrations with some even remote hope that it's going to come across online to where you're going to actually hear what we're talking about. And it seems like you're getting it, which is even better than anything we could have hoped for. So
yeah, and you're all funny as hell. I have to say that, like, over and over again, every single episode, like, I'm holding in laughter as I watch the comments come in. You guys are all incredibly funny. So thank you.
Thank you all for hanging. We didn't get a whole lot of questions this time, which is fine. So bone up on if you've got any thoughts, feel free to write them down and keep them for next time. And we're going to be back in a couple of weeks, and we're going to see if we can come up with a little some.
Hey, wait a minute. Okay, while we're here, I've got to bring
Hobo
Roadie. You're talking about help with your tone. Is this like a funny thing, or do you mean it? Because I don't know if we missed something or not, but if that's something we should talk about, we can totally do that. So if you're still there, chime in and tell us what you mean there. We'll do a drum roll and see if we get a response really fast. I don't have a snare drum here. Steve, you want to hop on the snare back there?
Yeah.
Do a little press roll.
Well, if Hobo didn't get back to us in time, that we can do it next time.
Absolutely. Throw it up in the comments of the episode, and we'll dive into it next week for sure.
Yeah.
We'd love to do that. So
and if you have any other sort of things that you want to hear compared to other stuff, feel free to let rip with it, because I'm kind of actually really well set up now to pull off these little live demos. My system has worked pretty flawlessly now, 3 shows in a row.
Yeah.
So I put a lot of time and effort into making it work, and it's working. So we're interested in doing more of it. And so hit us up about that. And we've got some stuff up our sleeve for the next time that we're going to work on. So we'll probably have a fun one next time. So thanks, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Joe. You're a godsend.
Certainly. And Brendan, a hot dog it's in its own universe. It's not a sandwich. It's just not. What do you think, Steve? Is a hot dog a sandwich? I call no.
I have never, ever, ever heard anybody walk up to a counter and say, I want a hot dog sandwich with no mustard and extra mayo.
Yeah.
It's a hot dog is a hot dog.
Yeah.
A hot dog is a damn hot dog.
That's right.
412 versus Fat Bottom. Here's the problem. They both have the same speakers in them. So with the mic right in front of them, they're going to sound virtually the same.
Word.
And Jeremy, I concur. A hot dog is not a sandwich.
All right. Well, we solved that one. All right, guys. Any other questions? Throw them in the comments of this episode, and we'll get to them next time. And wonderful spending the evening with you guys again. And we'll see you again next time.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.